across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. We are fast approaching 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. This is Talk. As you well know, we are the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you so much for your company. Always appreciate you joining me. Don't forget, I've got to tell you this, but if you just all subscribe, I can stop yabbing on about it. Go to my YouTube page if you miss anything. The Julia Hartley-Brewer Show. Hit subscribe, and you never have to miss a thing. Coming up in this hour, what are we leading with? Well, of course, you know it. Donald Trump has filed a $10 billion lawsuit, including a $5 billion defamation suit against who? The BBC. He's accusing the broadcaster of defamation. The US president's lawyers filed court papers claiming the broadcaster deliberately and maliciously doctors his speech in a panorama programme broadcast just a week before the 2024 presidential election. However, of course, it wasn't broadcast in America, so whether or not he's going to actually be able to make that claim through the Florida courts is one thing or another. Is the BBC likely to lose it? Well, who knows, but are they likely to settle? Well, probably, given it'll probably cost them about $10 million to settle, and it could cost them $100 million to fight, even if they win. So we'll be talking about that with the legal expert coming up. Love to hear your thoughts on that. Do get in touch. You support Donald Trump suing the BBC? Do you agree with JK? Yeah, if he brings down the BBC, that's fine. Because at the end of the day, if they did get a payout or any of the legal costs, are all being paid by you and me. I mean, there are literally people being hounded by the courts right now for not paying their licence fee because we've got to pay your licence fee. People having to pay up and pay fines, or even going to prison not paying their licence fee. And that money, if they did pay it, would be going to a multi-billionaire Donald Trump because of basically, let's face it, lies told by the BBC. I mean, I'm sorry, no one accidentally splices together two sections of speech 54 minutes apart unless they're trying to do it deliberately. Everyone knew they'd done it. Everyone knows why they did it. They've got Trump derangement syndrome. What do you expect? But is he right to sue our national broadcaster? And should we be paying out? Should the BBC settle? What do you want to happen? I want to hear your thoughts. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number to get in touch. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can also get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls, of course, as you know, are charged at the national rate. And altogether now, text costs one standard network rate message. Also going to be talking about the President very much in the firing line himself, widely criticised, including by me, for a social media post claiming that Trump derangement syndrome had contributed to the murders of Hollywood director Rob Reiner and his wife. The couple were found dead with their throats slit at their Los Angeles home, and the couple's son, Nick Reiner, is under arrest for the murders. But it's an extraordinarily nasty and insensitive post about two people who'd just been murdered. But, is that the same as what those horrible people on the left said after Charlie Kirk was murdered? Well, I would argue that he's the president and he should kind of behave better. But maybe that's an unreasonable expectation. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Plus, your thoughts on the resident doctors, junior doctors we used to call them. They'll be risking lives and abandoning patients in an hour of need when they go on strike at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning for the next 5 days. The Health Secretary Wes Streeting has accused medics of timing their walkout at the moment of maximum danger after they voted overwhelmingly yesterday to reject his last-ditch offer, which was more training places or not more money. And this, of course, as we see a big rise in flu cases in hospital. Plus, there's a growing risk that Russia could attack the UK, and the nation's sons and daughters need to be ready to fight. Who's saying that? Well, it's the head of Britain's armed forces, Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton, warned in a speech last night. We spoke about it yesterday on the show in advance, but he warned that Russia's military strength is increasing and is something to fear, and that Russian troops are now battle-hardened after spending nearly 4 years waging a full-scale war in Ukraine. I don't know how many more experts and military people who know what they're talking about can warn us, and our politicians keep ignoring it. We'll be talking about that and everything else. Want to hear from you, as I say, on the phone lines at 0344 499 1000 on everything we're talking about. But starting today with my guest joining me in the studio, as he does every Tuesday, editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. Good morning to you. Pleasure to have your company as always. So Donald Trump suing the BBC. It's funny because it's a $10 billion lawsuit. But the actual document that has been put in says it's $5 billion, but we know they're claiming $5 billion for basically for defamation, and also $5 billion for a violation of Florida's Deceptive and Unfair Trade Practices Act, filed in Florida because the statute of limitations on such a claim would no longer be valid in the UK. He's just under the wire for the 2-year delay, 2-year time limit on that in Florida. Do you think okay, first of all, do you think it's fair for him to sue?
Well, I think it's clear that the BBC did something horrendously wrong. I prefer these things not to be sorted out in court, particularly when you're dealing with someone who is the leader of the free world. I mean, he certainly has his right reply. He has the bully pulpit of the entire world, and particularly as someone who, you know, frankly is forced to pay that licence fee. I'd rather that there weren't any BBC funds that were being redirected to someone who doesn't really necessarily need it. I think it's to make a point, isn't it? Yeah. It's to try and exact a cost for dealing with him in this way. He's done that in the US with various other broadcasters already, lawsuits and so on, to try and stop them from having such biased coverage.
They have paid up and settled because, of course, they need to operate in America.
Which may well be part of the issue here, because, of course, the BBC is the British Broadcasting Corporation, but they obviously do operate in the US.
It's BBC America.
Exactly. So maybe this is what the longer game is. But broadly speaking, I think everyone knows that the BBC has been incredibly biased. Everyone can see they were banged to rights over that panorama
document. Don't think the BBC
document.
thinks that.
Not at all, but I don't even think this lawsuit would change their minds.
No, exactly. Well, then they can play victim, can't they? I mean, this is the thing. Even like the glib coverage on Radio 4 this morning, which I had to listen to just to know what they were saying about it. And managed not to punch my radio, to the floor. But I mean, there's no doubt at all. You don't accidentally put two bits of a speech together to make it look like quite blatant. I mean, it would be impossible to spot unless you knew the speech off by heart. I think if you've given that speech, we go, hold on a minute. Yeah. The claim that basically Donald Trump was basically telling people, the head of the January 6th riots, basically, go down to the Capitol and basically cause mayhem. That's not what he said. Now, again, a lot of the coverage of that speech has been very unreasonable. There's no doubt at all in my mind that when it did happen, we know this is from testimony from his own staff, his own family members in those January the 6th committee hearings, that he did nothing to stop it once it had started. He was the president. He could have gone out on social media and said, stop now, go home, do not do this in my name. He allowed it to happen. People were pleading with him to stop it. That's on record, OK? So we know that. He wasn't unhappy about it happening. He thought it was probably justified, is my view. Did he call for it to happen? No, I don't think he did. And this is the thing why any criticism of Donald Trump is not Trump derangement syndrome. You can criticise him for things that he does wrong, but you don't need to criticise him for things he doesn't do wrong. And you certainly don't need to make things up. And if he is such a heinous, awful human being as the BBC think he is, then you wouldn't need to make stuff up, would you? Because the clips would be there, the evidence would be there. And we'll come on to that with this Rob Reiner post. But my thing is, they did make something up about him, and they did mischaracterise him. Now, the question is, with defamation or libel, is has it actually damaged someone's character? Have they had a material loss? He says it did do that. You could argue that it probably didn't. People had made up their minds. It wasn't broadcast in America. Someone with the VPN could have watched it in Florida, and that might have changed the vote. But he won. He won that election in 2024. This was broadcast just a week beforehand. So, was there any damage done? No. But I'm rather of the view that even if someone doesn't do any damage to somebody, I think that people have a right to sodding well expect compensation when someone tells lies about them.
No, that's completely fair. I mean, of course, we need to be pretty careful about how we deal with defamation, how tightly those laws are drawn, very much tighter in the US than they are in the UK. I'm sure Donald Trump is furious that he's missed the kind of statute of limitations which exists on defamation cases.
I thought it was interesting that this all came out just a week or two after. I thought that the timing of that was quite...
Exactly. And who knows if those things might well be connected. Well, but I think the issue, as you say, is the fact that he is already someone who inspires very divided opinions. Is this BBC coverage, which, as you say, wasn't broadcast in the US itself, really made a material difference? Almost certainly not. Are they banged to rights on this issue? Absolutely. And I think it would just be probably slightly more edifying and would not really hand the BBC the kind of victim card that they now have to play
play
if this case didn't
Oh, the wonderful BBC.
But
Of course, this all comes about at the time when the government is now looking at the review of the licence fee that was coming up. They'll want to get that all done and dusted before they leave power, no question at all. Of course, they're doing a two-term in office, aren't they? Of course, that's their plan.
Definitely going to happen.
Definitely 100% going to happen, Keir. Not a problem at all. But this is the thing. I mean, you can like the BBC if you want to like the BBC and still think that what they did wrong and they should pay for it. Except that it's us paying for it. It's us. It's the public paying. It's our taxes paying for it. But if they fight it and they win, it's still us paying for it. But I've been hearing some legal experts, and we'll talk to one, Mark Stevens, in a few moments' time, saying, look, these things tend to settle for around the $10 million mark. Ain't going to win 10 billion or 5 billion or 8 billion or 100 billion. It's going to be around the 10 million mark. But it would cost about 100 million to fight through the American courts. So, settle it, move on. But here's my thing. I want that 10 million to be paid by the senior executives that allowed that to go out and didn't do the checks and balances, and the production company that employed somebody, because it was an external production company, to doctor that. I mean, I think people, this is the problem with the public sector, these people are not liable. And even so far, we've had two people go, the Director General of the BBC and the Head of News of the BBC. Both, I'm glad they're gone. But, by the way, we're still paying their wages, we'll pay their pensions. I mean, they haven't actually gone yet, they're still in their jobs, waiting for new people to be appointed. Again, always available for both jobs, guys, should you need me, if you want some impartial news. I just not enough heads have rolled over this. This was an appalling thing to do. And whenever the BBC, people are attacking them. No, we don't need to attack you. You do this to yourselves.
No, and it's part of the problem is the fact that a lack of accountability is built into the BBC from top to bottom. They're not directly accountable to viewers in the way that commercial broadcasters are, obviously, because they can rely on the licence fee. There's also a lot of politics which comes into it, which we've seen in the wake of this. You had basically the sort of Labour Party on the one hand saying, yes, they made mistakes, but also kind of running interference for them a little bit, because broadly speaking, they probably weren't that bothered by that kind of edit and the way that it was made. So should they be held accountable? Absolutely. The fact that heads have rolled already is a good thing, although it was telling how long it kind of took for that to take place. But is really a extortionate lawsuit, which is really only going to have a bill that will be footed by the British taxpayer. Ultimately, the way to solve this in our interest, obviously.
Well, indeed. And you've got to wonder whether or not Donald Trump could do damage to his reputation. I say this as someone who wouldn't have voted for him in 2016 or 2020, but I would have voted for him in 2024. He was the better of two options. And actually, in terms of the policies, what he's been doing and what he is doing, I'm very supportive of a lot of it, not all of it, but a hell of a lot of it. I think he's been far more sensible and sane and moral, actually, on a lot of these issues than the alternatives from the Democrats. But I also don't think he's a good person. I think it is possible to hold these ideas in your head. No, I don't think. I think he's a genuinely narcissistic, possibly psychopathic person. I genuinely, as you know, look, whether you agree with me or not, and people shout at me, oh, you got Trump derangement. I haven't got derangement syndrome. I give him credit when he does good things, and I criticise him when he does bad things. This is what you do when you're being actually a neutral observer on this. But I mean, I don't know how you could ruin someone's reputation when he posted this. Now, this is after the Hollywood director Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle were found dead, their throats slit at their Los Angeles home. And their son, one of their sons, Nick Reiner, has been arrested. He had major drug addiction problems, and he's been arrested, and they may expect he will be charged later today. And Donald Trump felt the need, after people like Obama had tweeted out, how much they loved Rob Reiner. There's no doubt at all, Rob Reiner, huge figure in Hollywood. I've got to be honest, I love a rom-com. I'm sorry, I like easy watching. Harry Met Sally is one of my favourite films, full stop. I love this guy. But yeah, do I agree with all of his politics? No. I mean, he was massively Democrat, massively anti-Trump, very, very critical of Trump, said he should have been in prison, blah, 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 as a lot of people in America do think. And he's entitled as a individual to exercise those views. Donald Trump wrote this on his Truth Social site yesterday. He wrote, a very sad thing happened last night in Hollywood. OK, fair enough. Rob Reiner, a tortured and struggling but once very talented movie director and comedy star, has passed away together with his wife Michelle, reportedly due to the anger he caused others through his massive, unyielding and incurable affliction with a mind-crippling disease known as Trump derangement syndrome. I mean, this is an extraordinary thing. He's basically blaming Rob Reiner for his own murder, because someone might not like his views on Donald Trump. This, by the way, I think is after his son had been arrested as well. Donald Trump continued, he was known to have driven people crazy by his raging obsession with Trump, with his obvious paranoia reaching new heights as the Trump administration surpassed all goals and expectations of greatness. And with the golden age of America upon us, perhaps like never before, may Rob and Michelle rest in peace! Exclamation mark. I mean, everything about that is tasteless and horrible, self-obsessed and wrong. People are saying, well, what about the horrible things that a load of Democrats and lunatics on social media wrote about the murder of Charlie Kirk, celebrating his murder on the right? But that's not the same thing, is it? Because there weren't any prominent Democrats, like senators or governors, who wrote anything along those lines. There's a difference between a lunatic lefty writing something like that on social media and the President of the United States.
No, I think that's a completely fair point. I mean, everyone knows that Donald Trump is an erratic individual. He says things that you wouldn't expect, not just a president or any kind of elected politician to say. I mean, there's just no filter, really. Like, any idea that might kind of briefly cross your mind that you would never even vocalise, let alone kind of put out and publish, is he doesn't have any of that that reflex. And as you say, I think there is so much hypocrisy which surrounds the kind of whole Trump discussion. People accusing him of lying in a way as if like that has never happened in politics before. People accusing him of being incredibly divisive. You know, the Democrats became enormously divisive in recent years. But at the same time, there is a line. This was clearly crossing it, and it's not. You know, it might not be the biggest issue in the world in American politics or whatever, things he's saying about Rob Reiner on social media. But it's people are within their rights to think this is just not really that becoming, I guess, of someone
of a president. It's as simple as that. You know, if you didn't like the guy, I mean, look, quite often there are people, who I disagree with or I've actually had personal spats with who have died. Just zip it. I mean, I don't want anyone to die. I mean, mass killers, quite happy for that Bondi gun, my dad to be dead. Good, great, he's dead. But I mean, as a general rule, you don't, just if you can't say anything nice, zip it. It's that simple. We're going to talk about the Bondi attack in just a moment, but let's talk also about what's happening here tomorrow at 7 a.m. Resident doctors, used to be junior doctors, they are going to go ahead with their 5-day strike in the run-up to Christmas. They've had a vote to ask whether should they go ahead with it, given the pressures from flu at the current time. They're going to go ahead with it. They're used to, you're going to cost people's lives. It's as simple as that. A lot of elderly people would normally be signed out and basically discharged from hospital ahead of Christmas, but they're not going to be able to do that admin because and do those inspections because there won't be enough doctors. Are they wrong to go on strike?
I think they've clearly lost this argument, and I think there's a level of sort of desperation which has set in, because if you look at the kind of pay hike that they had last time around, it was it was creeping towards 30% pay hike when they last were in these industrial disputes. To come back for more at this time was never going to land well. I think it's been quite telling how it's landed with the public as well as how it's landed with other people within the NHS. I think there is a sense that they're kind of pushing their luck, that people have become too politicised within the BMA. And it's not to say that there aren't some legitimate grievances there, whether it's around pay, whether it's around the general kind of working conditions, whether it's around sort of training and job placements, which is what the offer from the Labour Party seems mainly to constitute. But in order for a strike to actually be able to carry off and be politically successful, it needs to command a level of public support. And even historically, people might think that there's less, like people tend to back nurses and paramedics more than doctors. Even, previous doctor strikes could command a level of public support because people would really feel like they're doing an essential job in an essential service, and that's important. The fact that they've really kind of lost the room is telling, and I think it's because they've just pushed their luck a little bit too far. Well,
I think that's also very, very much related to the latest unemployment figures we've seen. Unemployment's just crept up slightly to 5.1%, but every creep up is a bad thing, is it not? But we've also seen the latest stats showing that we're seeing more and more jobless, but also crucially we are also seeing pay rises going up more for the public sector than for the private sector. Oh, what a surprise! And I think this is really telling. Average wage growth was 4.6%, excluding bonuses. Who are these people? I want to know what is this bonus thing that people get? That's between August and October this year. But if you're in private company, you're looking at 3.9% average wage growth. Okay, but public sector 7.6%. I mean, I'm sorry, but they're basically getting, double, pretty much double the pay rises, and everyone goes, oh, poor people in the public sector. And they go, well, they were hard done by over the years. No. Public sector and the private sector did really badly in austerity. Private sector been doing badly before then, and the public sector been going up. And by the way, they get bigger pension contributions as well. So I'm sorry, we are paying more and more people in the public sector, who, by the way, have zero increase in productivity, and we're paying. There's less and less pay rises in the private sector. Partly, one would expect, from these national insurance rises, which all the employers and everyone who understands basic economics, i.e. not our Chancellor, have said, if you increase the cost of employing people, they'll have to pay people less. Ta-da!
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things, isn't it, where it so sums up Labour's sort of management of the economy, which is not to say that people in the public sector don't deserve a pay rise. I'm sure many of them work very hard. It's just the fact that when people look at the economy more broadly, they see the fact that a lot of bungs have been given to the public sector, which is, basically a kind of large base of support for the Labour Party as much as anything else. Meanwhile, the private sector is being absolutely pummeled. So it's, we could get into a kind of like beggar my neighbour situation. You don't necessarily, everyone's had a not great time, to be honest, since the financial crisis. The kind of squeeze on productivity, on living standards and all the rest of it. It's been, when you really take a step back, it's been a economically awful couple of decades, really. But at the same time, I think it's the way in which you see this disparity between the public and private sector is a clear indication that particularly this Labour government, the previous ones, have failed to deal with those underlying problems. And because the public sector is a bit more unionised, because of the fact that there's obvious incentives to keep it on the road because of public services or a vote winner and so on, there's been less neglect of it in some cases than we've seen elsewhere. But the broader picture is not great regardless of what side of the fence you're on.
Let's go back to what's been happening in Australia and the Bondi Beach attack. Lots of evidence now about the son of the father and son, Naveed, and his father, Sajid, died on the scene. Naveed, it's been actually emerged in the last few moments that she's woken up from his coma in hospital, critically injured, but certainly not life-threatening injuries, and that they had both travelled to the Philippines. It is thought possibly to get some military training. There has been some extremism in the southern part of the Philippines, but also that he'd been looked into for his belief in Islamic State ideology as young as the age of 18. Here we go again. This is what happens every time we have an attack in the UK as well. These people are known to the authorities, they've been looked at, they haven't got enough evidence, and they go, oh well, we will. Now, I've got a lot of sympathy for the security services because in every country, because there are so many people they need to look at. How do you prioritise? This guy's low priority, let's go worry about someone else. And that's what they're dealing with. And, as that old IRA quote, you have to be lucky every time, we only have to be lucky once, but it is extraordinary that once again people who are just harbouring ISIS ideology, Islamic State ideology and extremist views, living amongst people thought of as completely normal, are actually wanting to kill the people they live next door to.
No, and that's the thing that we can't get away from, the horror of that. We've become too accustomed to this. Australia less so. They're starting to be bitten by this in a way that we were, more than 20 years ago now. But it's a telling reminder that purely the security services, purely counter-terror policing, is not sufficient ultimately to deal with this threat. They can be as on it as humanly possible. It's always worth looking at when you see one of these horrific attacks actually being pulled off. The number that are foiled is always amazing whenever you see that reported. These things are happening all the time. In the UK, we've got tens of thousands of people on a watch list for Islamist terrorism. It's 3/4 of the MI5 terrorism caseload. And as you say, they only have to be lucky once. So it's one of those things where clearly the confrontation with this cannot purely about trying to nab people at the right time. There will always be people who slip through the cracks. We need to look at the kind of root causes as to why this has happened.
Yeah, exactly. But again, what really annoys me, and I was saying this on the show yesterday, there's always vigils and candles, and there's vigils outside Parliament, which Sadiq Khan, for some reason, the London Mayor, thought it was an idea to try and stop it. It's like, seriously, mate, read the room. Lots of vigils in Australia. We've got all the TV cameras are all down. They sent down their top reporter, and they're all and interviewing everybody, and everyone's feeling very sad. And they will not discuss, which we did immediately at 10 o'clock yesterday, discuss what is the the problem. There's no point in moting about it. Stop pretending you care after the case. If you actually care, you'll stop the next set of people being murdered, whether they're Jews or anybody else. And I just find it infuriating. I know you tweeted very early on, absolutely look back in anger. But every time I see another sort of interview, they go, oh, and how do you feel? I don't care how people feel. I want people to stop being killed on beaches.
And people,
you know?
Of course, people are going to respond to the horror in Bondi, as we've seen in Heaton Park and Manchester Arena and the London Bridge attacks 1 and 2. We could reel off this list with a level of horror, concern, tears. That's absolutely fine.
Don't dare be shocked by it.
That's human.
Don't you dare.
Don't be shocked, and also get angry. This is not a natural disaster. This is not a bit of bad weather. This is not something horrific which befell a group of people completely by accident and there's no boo about it. This is not even just a kind of random act of violence. This is a concerted effort that's been waged for decades now on the part of people who loathe this society, who loathe Jews, who loathe freedom, who will happily murder Holocaust survivors, children, gunning people down indiscriminately because they are adherents to an ideology that most of the time our politicians even struggle to name.
Yeah.
That's the problem. That's what we need to confront. So, yeah, thoughts and prayers, great. Emoting.
Doesn't
There's
solve
a time
anything.
and a place for that, I suppose. But what we need is politicians who are going to come forward and say, you know what right now,
what are we going to do?
We need action.
What are we going to do about it? Exactly. I completely agree. It is interesting, some new footage that's emerged actually today of we obviously saw that hero, Ahmed Ahmed, who shot himself, basically jumping on the father, Sajid Akram, and taking his gun from him just before both were shot by the police in Australia. Police already on the scene, by the way, not acting because they didn't have guns, but a brave civilian did. But new dash cam footage has emerged from the police of a man falling to the road beside Sajid earlier, holding the gun he just wrestled from him. A woman stands nearby. They both then got shot. Absolute heroes. Thought that they were. They were they'd just been shot as innocent victims. They were incredible, brave heroes. They battled to stop him. They'd done their best. I mean, just people just going to the beach.
Yep.
It's just amazing, these tales of bravery and humanity that we are seeing, which we can't show that footage right now. There's so much more to talk about. But of course, Dale Vince, the Labour donor, £5 million he's given to the Labour Party. Keir Starmer's big mate. He thinks basically, well, it's because of the genocide in Gaza, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry, Palestine. It's not a place called Palestine, it's called Gaza. We'll come to that a little bit later. Right now, we're going to take a quick break. I want to hear your thoughts on all the topics we're talking about, particularly Donald Trump suing the BBC, but everything else, have your say. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. We'll get your calls up next, and we'll be talking to media lawyer Mark Stevens. This is Talk.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. For me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 10:32 is the time. Just to let you know, the BBC has just issued a statement saying they will defend the corporation against that $10 billion lawsuit from Donald Trump. We'll bring you more details on that in a couple of moments. Let's get to your calls quickly on that as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Cindy is calling and she's in Michigan. Hello, Cindy. What do you want to say?
Hi. I want to say first I'm starstruck that I'm even able to talk to you.
God bless you. Get this woman some men in white coats.
You are the most amazing journalist, woman, anchor in the world.
You're very, very kind, and I think you just haven't had a good night's sleep. But listen, what do you want to say about? What are you calling up about, Cindy? Thank you. It's very sweet of you.
I'm calling up about the BBC. I do think it's appropriate that Donald Trump is suing. They did slice two parts of a speech together, and they made it. I think it's appropriate. And I think the BBC should settle if they're smart, but I don't think they're going to. I think they're going to fight this.
And they really shouldn't, given that any money that's spent on lawyers or any money that's spent on a payout is going to actually come out from British taxpayers. We should have a say in it, shouldn't we?
I do know that. But I think a lot of the taxpayers want the BBC to go down anyway because they're not like the BBC used to be.
No.
And I think it's unfair that people have to pay for this service anyway.
Well, people pay for Netflix. I mean, the thing is, you're not forced by law to pay for Netflix.
Maybe they'd be better off just watching talkTV.
Well, I mean, I think they'd be better informed. Can I just ask you just finally, what do you make of Donald Trump's Rob Reiner post?
Ooh, I'm going to say, I have to also say, to begin with, to preface this, that I am a staunch Trump supporter, and I have supported everything that he's done. But when I read this post, I honestly, my jaw dropped to the ground. Yeah. And I just thought, I've got nothing. I honestly can't defend this post.
It was unbecoming of a president.
It was unbecoming, childish, inappropriate. Yeah. And it was almost incoherent because it didn't make sense. How are you saying these ugly things that basically he deserved to be stabbed and then end it with a lovely rest in peace? And,
that was just weird.
I love you dearly. He didn't say that, but I'm just adding that because it was that ridiculous.
It was quite bizarre, wasn't it?
He may as well have said, I always loved you, Rob.
Yeah, it was quite bizarre. Cindy's saying that, and she's a Trump voter and supporter. I'll have to leave it there. You're very kind for your lovely words. We do appreciate them here at Talk. Cindy in Michigan there. I'm going to get to other calls that are coming up very soon. We're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to media lawyer Mark Stevens about that BBC defamation case being brought by Donald Trump. Should they settle? Could they win? Would they lose? And who has ended up paying for it all? This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, welcome back to the show. 10:37 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's go straight to my next guest and talk about, well, the BBC being sued for a whopping $10 billion, not million, $1 billion by Donald Trump. Let's talk to media lawyer Mark Stevens. A very, very good morning to you, Mark.
That's obviously Floridian inflation, Julia, because the original letter before action said 1 billion, then we got to 5, and now we're at 10.
Well, exactly. I understand the actual documents filed in the Florida courts say 5 billion, but we're told it's 5 billion for defamation, 5 billion for this is a violation of Florida's Deceptive and Unfair Trade Practices Act. So what does that mean?
Well, essentially, it's the BBC have deceived the public. And this really goes to the heart of the case. Multiple US judges have noted that President Trump's exhortations to fight, stop the steal, as central to the riot on January the 6th, on the very day that the election was going to be certified. And they say that expressions such as fight and take back our country, combined with urging supporters to walk down Pennsylvania, could be interpreted as directed at inciting
except when he called on his supporters to walk down Pennsylvania Avenue towards the Capitol, he was saying, I can't remember the exact words, but it was in peace. That was cut out and it was spliced on this BBC Panorama documentary to basically, we fight, we fight. There was no way in the world, unless you knew that speech off by heart, you wouldn't know that those sentences had not been said together. That was a direct, absolutely clear and direct attempt to basically skewer what he'd say and to twist what he said. It was. Donald Trump uses this phrase far too much, but it was fake news. Now, Donald Trump lies every other time he opens his mouth. That is, I'm sorry, I think that's a proven matter of fact. That's not Trump derangement syndrome. It doesn't matter that other US courts may have found or judges may have found this or that against Donald Trump. The job of the BBC as our national state broadcaster is to provide facts and to provide politically neutral reporting. That wasn't politically neutral reporting and it wasn't factual. They'd been caught bang to rights.
Can I push back on that a little? Because essentially the law says it's only libel if essentially it's untrue. Yeah. And what the BBC will argue, amongst other things, is that essentially there was an element of directing incitement towards imminent lawful action. Yes, he didn't say those things, but the BBC in essence said that the sting of what he said is that there was a call for action and there was no time for quiet reflection. So it might well be fair comment or a fair characterisation.
So the defence will be, we completely made something up, but it was true anyway, so it's okay.
Yeah, and that's the way we lawyers work. But there's a lot of tripwires for President Trump's lawyers between here and there. I mean, they've filed the complaint. They're going to have to serve it on the BBC in the UK. That's a very tricky, technically fraught process. And in fact, in my career, I think I've only had one claim properly served.
What's difficult about it? I mean, you just literally tell it with an envelope, don't you? We've all seen Hollywood movies.
You'd think so, but no, that isn't the case, because of course you've got to go through the legal system in America, who have to communicate it to the legal system here. It is very fraught. But
and the reason he's done it in Florida is because the statute of limitations, basically, it was past the period where you could actually bring a case in the UK, and that's why he's done it in Florida. But part of the big issue there, of course, is that this programme was broadcast in the UK. It wasn't broadcast in America, unless someone had a VPN and was watching it on stream, outside of normal broadcasting, pretending they were in the UK. They wouldn't have been able to see it. But in
that point, you've nailed it almost exactly, because the point is that the burden is on President Trump to show, or his lawyers to show, that it was seen and that people thought the less of him and he suffered substantial harm. And as we know, what he's asking in the lawsuit, which I had the pleasure of reading this morning, is that should be inferred, because somebody might have been able to see it if they were a BritBox supplier, provider in Florida, or they might have used a VPN. There's no direct evidence that they did. And I'm not sure that that inference is a safe one. So I think the BBC will be making motions to dismiss this claim at a very early stage on the grounds there was no publication or no proven publication in Florida. Therefore, the courts don't have jurisdiction. And on top of that, they didn't have what we, or what American lawyers called actual malice, i.e. they deliberately told a falsehood rather than trying to convey the essence, wrongly, but convey the essence of what he said. And let's not forget that this whole case is founded on essentially an untruth, that the election had been stolen. And so having that re-examined in the court case, essentially that's going to be put on trial.
And there have been numerous cases on that, and it's been, I mean, categorically it was not stolen. Donald Trump did lose that election fair and square. That said, again, you know, when he won it fair and square in 2016, the Democrats made very similar claims. They didn't threaten insurrection, I get that, but nevertheless, they know, you know, if everyone's going to be doing it, they can't blame it, Donald Trump.
This suit, Julia, is a bit like finding Shergar in Soho on a Tuesday. It's not impossible in a metaphysical sense, but practically speaking, you're hunting a highly specific evidential thing. You've got to show falsity, you've got to show harm, you've got to show the proof that the BBC knew it was wrong and that they deliberately published it in Florida. And I think the odds lengthen with every
search. Okay, so they've issued a statement, the BBC, in the last 10 minutes or so, saying they will defend this case. They say they're not going to make any further comments on the current legal proceedings. Now, we know that legal cases cost an absolute fortune in the UK. They cost even more in America. I've heard some legal experts saying you're looking at $100 million to fight this case all the way to in the United States, and it could and that would be to win or lose. Now, if there is a payout to Donald Trump, either losing the case and the cost of legal fees and then his legal fees as well, we are talking huge sums of money, aren't we? Even if it's not $5 billion.
I don't think we're talking that kind of level. No. I mean, if there's a genuine commercial offer on the table, maybe a charitable donation to a charity of Melania's choice or something, then that would be sensible.
Maybe.
But
that's the thing.
Be doing this. This is about protecting your right, our right to freedom of expression.
No, this is the thing. I'm sorry. Your freedom of expression does not include making stuff up that people didn't say. And I think the BBC have been caught bang to rights and that they need to pay for it. Now, what bothers me is that even if they settle it, and people are talking about a lot of these cases in America have been settled for around the 10 million mark, whether that's dollars or pounds, you know, if that, whatever payment they make and whatever costs there are, it's all being paid for by you and me and Tom and everyone listening and watching who has a licence fee required by law if you're watching live television. Now, that's going to irk a lot of people. Whether you, I mean, I'm not a defund the BBC person. I don't go along with that. I don't want the BBC to disappear, but I absolutely want the BBC to be ripped up and started again from the beginning, because I think they are so deeply mired in political bias and I think we need so many heads to roll that we need to kind of rip it up and start again. But you know, a lot of people are going to say, hold on a minute, I'm paying my licence fee. I'm struggling to pay my bills as it is. I'm paying my licence fee for highly paid lawyers to defend an organisation that put out a blatant lie.
Well, that's the question in the case. Was it a blatant lie?
Yes. I don't think that, no.
Hang on.
No, the question is whether... No, it was a lie. He didn't say what they claimed he said.
Okay, it was not a truthful representation of what he said.
Most people use the word lie.
The question is, was it a correct characterization of what he said? And that, I think, is true.
I'm not Donald Trump's #1 fan. I think he's perfectly fair to bring a case and make a complaint. But the question is, who's going to end up paying? Have enough heads rolled? I mean, 2 senior people going. I want everyone involved in that panorama to be gone, and I want the people who've been involved in it. I want their money to pay for the cost of this legal suit.
Well, I think we're aligning 2 things. I think we can all agree that the BBC has got problems at the board level and elsewhere.
Not the board level, because there's a Tory on the board. Hasn't got a problem at the board level. It's got a problem from top to bottom.
Well, all right, top to bottom. I'm not going to get into a debate about that. What I am going to say is I don't want my licence fee money going to a meritless claim, and I don't think anyone else does either.
But there's going to be a cost either way. So should the BBC settle?
No, not unless it's a commercial settlement. They have to fight this. They have to stand up for the essential truth that there was no stolen election and that essentially he incited people to go to the Capitol Hill. And that is based on the findings of 8 American courts.
OK, we'll leave it there. Great to talk to you. Always interesting. Mark Stevens, the media lawyer there. Thank you very much indeed. Tom Slater, your reaction to that?
Well, I think we need to get away from this idea that the spirit of what Panorama was saying was true rather than the letter. Because, first of all, people can have different opinions on Trump's role in the January 6th issue. He wasn't found criminally indictable for incitement.
Oh my God, they tried.
Exactly, and so that's obviously a clear-cut distinction. People saying he was kind of morally responsible, that's something people can disagree over, but that's precisely where the public broadcaster shouldn't be being too clear-cut, and also, to be perfectly frank, shouldn't be stitching together 2 bits of a speech in order to make it seem that was the case.
Do you think I'd still be in a job if I did that?
Well, this is it.
I'm sorry, I would be absolutely sacked for doing that. And any equivalent of that in any commercial broadcaster, you'd be sacked. I'm sorry.
And it's just because it's Donald Trump that people see it differently. And maybe you could say that's fair enough. It was a horrendous day on January 6th, 2021. But at the same time, we need to uphold standards regardless of who.
And again, just because you don't like Donald Trump means that you can get away with it. Exactly. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Give us a call 0344 499 1000. Up next, we're going to take a quick break and then talk about the small matter of pretty much every military expert in the country saying we need to prepare for war. We've had the head of the armed forces last night saying we need to prepare our sons and daughters to go to war. Are you prepared to send your son or daughter? We'll talk about that. This is Talk.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:51 is the time. Let's turn our attention to the small matter of going to war. Your sons, your daughters, my daughter, anyone else's son possibly being required to go to war, to be ready to fight. Who's saying that? Well, the head of Britain's armed forces. This is the message, an extraordinarily, they're describing it as a blunt intervention. I think we can safely say this is as clear-cut as we can get, and not from a former armed forces chief, finally unmuzzled and willing to speak, but the man who is actually currently the chief of the Defence Staff, Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton, warning in a speech at the Royal United Service Institute last night that Russia's military strength is increasing and is something to fear. Russian troops are battle-hardened after 4 years of war in Ukraine, and he said the UK's armed forces would always be the first line of defence alongside the rest of the NATO alliance, but the whole of society must also play a part in rebuilding resilience. And he talked about it's important to be honest with families and households across the UK about what it means to be prepared for an array of real physical threats, and we need to prepare our sons and daughters to be ready to fight. Let's talk about this with Elliot Wilson, military writer and historian. Good morning to you, Elliot.
Good morning, Julia.
These are incredibly stark words, and they come after a string of senior figures, former Navy chief saying last week or so, similar words. These messages are coming thick and fast. Why are so many senior military figures speaking out right now and so openly and bluntly?
I think there's two parts to it. I think there is a growing realisation that this is an incredibly serious matter and that really attention is required. But also I think there's a sense that, retired and now serving military officers are saying this kind of thing, and the government is saying, yes, we agree, and then nothing's happening. Yeah. Keir Starmer talked yesterday at the liaison committee about pulling a lever and nothing happened. Well, he's not even pulling the lever.
And by the way, he complained about that a year ago.
Yeah, well, Tony Blair complained about it 25 years ago, and it's only largely true, and partially true, and it's missing the point anyway. But I think the problem is that the government has a lot of things it needs to do, a lot of things it says it's going to do, and it's either not doing them or they're taking so incredibly long to happen. Yeah. We had the Strategic Defence Review took more than a year. The National Security Strategy came out after it, which makes no sense, which also took a year. We're still waiting on the Defence Industrial Plan. We're still waiting on the Resilience Bill that's going to become before Parliament. Yeah. And this is not time we can give away. This is time ticking away while our adversaries are preparing and getting stronger.
Yeah. And we're still talking about, just very slowly increasing our spending on percentage of GDP up from below 3% to 3%, then 3.5%. But again, over a period of about 10 years, we'll already be at war then, according to pretty much every single expert. And every single person I speak to, again and again, who knows about this stuff, says the best way to avoid war is to prepare for war, be ready and willing to fight. And the stats are really clear. Every statement we've had, the Defence Select Committee report recently, everything, it's very clear. We are not ready for war. We don't have the manpower, we don't have the munitions, we don't have the aircraft carriers, don't have the jets, don't have the tanks, we don't have any of it. But this is stuff that is within the control of the Prime Minister, because he can order that money to be spent, but that does involve uncomfortable choices at budgets. And a lot of people will say, well, I'd rather you spent more on the NHS and I got my operation quicker than there was money spent on military hardware, which we may never need. How does the Prime Minister, how do we explain to people that, it's the best way of never needing it is to have it?
Well, I think the Prime Minister and the whole government needs to be much clearer on leading this conversation they've talked about. But you're talking about the NHS. It's perfectly understandable that people think the NHS is a much more pressing priority. We need to spend money on that. If you have a Russian cyber attack on the NHS, which collapses the power to a hospital for 24, 48 hours, it doesn't matter how much money the hospital has. It's not functioning. People are coming to harm. People are potentially dying because operations aren't happening. This is the reality of what we're facing. People seem to be thinking that what is being mooted is a sort of old-style Cold War invasion of Europe solely by ground forces, and that therefore that's so unlikely it doesn't matter. Yes. But that's not the reality. The reality is this sort of whole spectrum of attacks against us, which we're already seeing, from the Skripal poisonings in Salisbury in 2018 to arson attacks in East London to cyber attacks to Russian ships sniffing around the data cables that link us to the rest of the world.
And why do they want the data cables, the communication cables, the electric cables, the gas pipelines? Why do they want to know where those are, other than so they can destroy them when they choose to?
Exactly, and as an island, we're uniquely vulnerable to any loss to any of those, and that's what experts and what parliamentary committees have said again and again. But nothing seems to be happening. And
is that because you think there's lack of political will? Is it just heads in sands? Is it we've got a whole generation of politicians who don't largely have a military background, whereas generations before they would have fought in wars, they'd have taken it seriously? Or is it just look, times are hard, people are cross, less money to spend in their, from their earnings, and costs of living going up, and they think that politically it's unacceptable to voters to spend this money?
I think there's an element of all of those things, but I think the two major things are, firstly, ministers haven't really grappled with the implications of what they themselves have said. They haven't followed the logic train through to the end, which is spending considerably more, twice what we're spending now.
Yes, we're not talking about going up to 3.5%. This is not of GDP.
What the government is committed to is raising our current spending from about 2.3, 2.4% of GDP to 2.6% by 2027.
It's a joke.
Firm commitment.
And we're talking about, we're spending roughly, 50-60 billion right now on defence. What sort of subs? And again, it's not just about the money, it's whether you spend it well, where you can get stuff quickly, build stuff quickly. What sort of subs are we talking about?
It's going to need to end up to be in, twice that, at least 100 billion.
And that's a heck of a lot of money.
It is a lot of money, but I think the other problem that the government has, and you've seen this across the field, not just in defence policy, is that it still has a deep-seated feeling that if it says something, it's already happened, and that there is no real follow-through.
That's the trouble of being governed by lawyers, I think. That's the difference, as opposed to, say, rather by engineers or the like. This, of course, all has a lot of bearing on what's going on at the moment, these ongoing talks. Every day there's more peace talks, more shuttle diplomacy going on about Ukraine. Lots of talk from the Americans that we're getting close to some sort of deal there that the Russians and the Ukrainians could be happy with, but we are talking about some sort of NATO style, but not in NATO guarantee to the Ukrainians on territory, but they'd have to cede territory to the Russians. But where do you think we are with that?
I think it's very difficult to tell, because you've got Donald Trump, who will attempt to sell anything on any particular day, and Vladimir Putin, who is keeping his counsel. I think one of the difficulties with what seems to be emerging at the moment is, firstly, Donald Trump is basically saying the Ukrainians are going to have to give up the Donbass, because I think he said yesterday they've already lost it. Yeah. So there's clearly an acceptance on the American part that that's part of the deal. And there's also this idea of a sort of reassurance force which will be governed by international legal obligations. I think if you've got legal obligations and two of your participating parties are Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, it's not a great basis for any kind of confidence.
And by the way, Britain, Russia and America had already signed a guarantee to Ukraine to protect their borders when they gave up nuclear weapons. So I'm not sure what that's worth.
Absolutely. I mean, the point is essentially, is there going to be some way of bringing the conflict to an end and also guaranteeing that Russia doesn't then start it again in a year, 18 months' time? And we don't have, as Europeans, we don't have the full capacity to stop that militarily, because we rely on assets like intelligence and logistics from the Americans. The Americans are making very, very airy noises about maybe they'll support it. But I think until we see some kind of absolutely hammered out text which explains what would happen if there were an infringement of any agreement, then it's hard to have any confidence in it coming to an end.
Absolutely. Elliot Wilson, we'll leave it there. Thank you so much. Really interested to get your expertise, military writer and historian. I think we need to talk to military historians an awful lot more, along with military chiefs, about, again, I think that most military chiefs seem to think we are in 1930s territory, and we need to prepare and not be shocked. Our politicians keep being shocked by everything, don't they? Give us a call, your thoughts, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. Thank you very much, Dee, for your company. This is Talk, the home of common sense, just approaching 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or your smart speaker watching on YouTube or you're connected by, thank you so much for your company. Loads more to talk about, including Donald Trump filing that $10 billion lawsuit against the BBC, accusing the broadcaster of defamation. The defamation is $5 billion of that case. This is over that Panorama, basically completely and utterly doctored version of a speech he gave back in 2021 ahead of those January 6th of riots. But crucially, the BBC say they are going to fight this case. So your and my money is going to be spent no matter what. If you pay for the BBC licence fees, yes, I watch live television, I'm legally required to do. It's all very well if you think you can get away with not breaking the law. I can't, sorry. So we're going to be paying for it. We're also going to be talking about the Labour donor Dale Vince, £5 million he's given to the Labour Party, but he's sparked outrage and calls for Keir Starmer to basically refuse to take any more money from him. He'll take money from anyone, who are we kidding? After a social media post on X blaming Israel for the Bondi Beach massacre. I mean, it's amazing how powerful Israel is, isn't it? That they're able to direct gunmen on Bondi Beach. Vince said that anti-Semitism has been fuelled by Israel committing genocide in Palestine. It's called Gaza, and it wasn't a genocide. But apart from that, Dale Vince, oh yeah, absolutely accurate. He also said that Benjamin Netanyahu wants anti-Semitism to, quote, be a thing and acts to make it so, because, of course, anti-Semitism doesn't actually happen and isn't a thing at all. Genuinely, these people are deluded and, frankly, dangerous. Yes, Dale Vince, I'm talking about you. What you say is dangerous. We'll be talking about that. He has been invited on the show for some reason too fit to come on these days. Meanwhile, Labour is set to scrap its Islamophobia definition in favour of what they're going to call anti-Muslim hostility in an effort to head off claims that it's creating a blasphemy law by the back door. But will it still be a blasphemy law? And also thousands of innocent motorists who did not speed have been fined for speeding thanks to a fault with every speed camera on smart motorways across Britain. In fact, something like 1 in 10 of motorways and A roads in the country could cost millions in compensation, but the glitch existed in the speed camera system on those motorways for 4 years. Enforcement of the cameras across the UK has been stopped temporarily as the speeding data can no longer be relied on. So speed away, apparently. Do not speed away. I'm not endorsing you breaking the law. Right now, let's talk to Tom Slate. He's editor of Spiked Online, has been joining us throughout the show. Good morning once again to you. I want to talk to you, and I will in a few moments, about where we are with Ukraine and where we are also on this need for us to ready for war. But first up, let's put the question to you that I'm putting to our audience. I'll get the numbers again. Donald Trump suing the BBC for over $10 billion over those fake news Panorama clips that were spliced together 54 minutes apart from a speech he gave on January the 6th, 2021. Over the, he claims, stolen election in 2020. But it was doctored, it was put together, let's face it, completely knowingly by the BBC. Who we kidding? You don't accidentally do that. And let's face it, it would have been done for political reasons, because we know how biased the BBC is. It's blatantly obvious every single day of the week. I want to know what your reaction is to that, though. Should Donald Trump be suing, given that it's any cost of it, whether it's settlement, whether it's just lawyers' fees, whether it is a payout to Donald Trump, it's all going to come out of your and my back pockets. What's your reaction? What do you think? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV, and calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1, standard network rate message. So, Tom, is Donald Trump bang to rights for suing the BBC, and should they fight it?
Well, I think that, to be brutally frank, everyone knows what the BBC is committed here. It's not entirely obvious to me that this is going to have clear kind of legal standing in the way that he hopes it will. We'll find out. But it's also probably the case that it's more the threat of litigation rather than the litigation itself, which is the aim here. There's been various other cases with American domestic broadcasters where the lawsuit is basically the opening salvo towards, hopefully, from his perspective, a payout.
A settlement. Exactly,
a settlement. So it's one of those things where I think the BBC are bang to rights. Do I want taxpayers' money, licence fee payers' money to line the pockets of someone who quite frankly doesn't necessarily need the money. What would
that's
be
irrelevant, though. I mean, billionaires are just as much entitled to sue when people lie about them. In fact, they're the only people able to, because if you lie about poor people, they can't afford to sue.
What would be ideal is if there had actually been proper accountability to begin with. Yes, heads have rolled, but at the same time, does anyone really think that there's been the kind of level of soul searching which would be necessary?
And by the way, heads only rolled 6 months later when this story emerged, and I do think it's telling that story only emerged after it became impossible for him to sue. It was genuinely just like a week or two after the statute of limitations on him taking action against this documentary, the makers of this documentary had ended under our laws. I think that is frankly fishy in itself. They obviously thought we can get away with letting this out now.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's hard not to come to that conclusion, isn't it, given the timing? But, you know, it's one of those things where one is also suspects that this lawsuit will kind of, aside from the rights and wrongs of it, will be kind of grist to the mill of the idea that the BBC are the victims here, and I'd rather that didn't play out.
No, that's the thing. I mean, my God, they can always make themselves the story, they can always make themselves the victim. They are the perpetrators in this case. They've been caught bang to rights. It's the fact they genuinely, and if you watch any of the discussions on this on the BBC, and particularly Radio 4, which is the worst offender, utterly delusional. I mean, they genuinely don't think they've done anything wrong, because they're all... when you talk about Trump derangements, they really are completely deranged. I get accused of it all the time. I call it as I see it. When the guy does good things, I praise it. When the guy does bad things, I criticise him. For instance, that Rob Reiner post he wrote, which we discussed earlier in the show. One hell of a post, when a man's been murdered, and the man who's been arrested and will likely be charged later today for that murder of him and his wife is his own son, who has had a battle with drug addiction. And, I mean, absolutely horrific crime and horrific circumstances, and Donald Trump thought it was a good idea because his guys criticised him. And yeah, Donald Trump has said, he should be in prison, and Donald Trump has said, Rob Reiner has said Donald Trump should be in prison and been very critical of him. He's a Democrat, he's massively anti-Trump. Yeah, fine, but he's entitled to do that. He's a private citizen, okay? Donald Trump is the President of the United States. There is an argument where he kind of undermines his own ability to claim that his character has been damaged and people would think less of himself as part of his defamation suit, when he himself creates people thinking less of him. I've said for months, over a year, I would have voted for Donald Trump in November 2024. He was the better of two options. His actual policies, by far better of the two options. But he makes it hard. He makes it hard to defend him.
No, absolutely. And I think that's an important thing, because Trump derangement syndrome is very much a problem. Various parts of our own media and political class have fallen victim to it. There's also a bit of a problem with sort of Trump devotion syndrome, people refusing to accept any criticism of the man, even though there's all sorts of things that he's done, said, not said, which have not reflected well on him. And I think it's one of those difficulties, though, which is that there's just always kind of double standards on both sides. So we're just kind of arguing over, who is the bigger lie, who is this, who is that. And the BBC thing is a good example of that. The defence, which is almost made of the panorama fudge, fabrication, whatever we want to call it, is that it might have technically been wrong, but the spirit of it is right.
Yeah,
I think is the most alarming thing in all of this. Like, you don't have to engage in, again, sort of Trump derangement syndrome to say, like, even if you are convinced that this man is uniquely dishonest and evil and whatever, why would you junk your own supposed standards in the face of that? It makes absolutely no sense.
if he did actually say it, you wouldn't need to make it up. You wouldn't need to splice two things together. And again, I mean, our media law guest, Mark Stevens, has pointed out, I mean, there have been numerous cases, 8 cases, where judges have ruled that Donald Trump did have a role to play on January the 6th, that getting up the crown and everything, but categorically has never been criminally charged. Because, and not just he lost it, he has never been criminally charged. Why? Because he did not say, go and riot at the Capitol. You could argue, oh, well, he was geeing them up and everything. Yeah, he told absolute lies. He knows perfectly well the election wasn't stolen from him. But then, by the way, so did Hillary Clinton and that lot know perfectly well the election wasn't stolen from her in 2016. So they made up lies as well in 2016. Doesn't justify anything. They're all as bad as each other as far as I'm concerned. We've got the same people, by the way. Keir Starmer, who says, thinks Donald Trump's awful to have done that. Keir Starmer spent 3 sodding years telling all of us ahead of the 2016-2019 that we didn't know what we voted for Brexit, and again, supporting all these Russian interference theories and the like. So frankly, they can do one as well. They're all as bad as each other. And the thing is, you can't criticise someone for doing stuff if you do it yourself. I just don't want to have to pay for it. I want the people who did this to pay for it. I think you should be like. I'm pretty sure I would be liable if I did something like that. You should be. Don't. It's a really, really easy way. I've never been sued for libel. I've never lost an Ofcom complaint. Never lost an Ipso complaint on newspapers. Never. No, you know why? Because I check my facts. Because I'm a journalist. I've had training and I do the job properly. And if you don't say things that are untrue or against the law, you don't actually have any problems. Now, my thing is always that, if I'm going to be forced by Ofcom lunatics to say that I believe that a man is a woman, well, I'd have gone to court over that one quite happily, and I'd have, pretty sure I could have crowdfunded my fees on that one. But that's different. It's really easy not to defame people because you don't say things that aren't true about them.
Exactly.
It's just that simple.
Surely can't be that difficult.
No, exactly. Give us a call. I want to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Do you think the BBC should settle them? Because it would be cheaper for them to settle than to fight the case, unless they can try and get it thrown out of court early on. But I think he'll just keep going, really. Let's talk about the story we were talking about just before the top of the hour. And this is the Armed Forces Chief, Air Chief Marshal Sir Richard Knighton. Now, I hadn't heard of him until yesterday either. I mean, the number of senior military figures we have now, a lot of them have changed in the last year or so. I think we got used to hearing from them, back a few years ago. But we've had again and again and again senior former military figures coming out and speaking about the threat that is posed by Russia, by China, by Islamists, by whoever, and how we need to be getting our act together and spending more. We've had, former defence secretaries like Ben Wallace and others speaking out. And again, like everyone speaks out once they've left government or left office. And now we are seeing more and more and more. We had the former naval chief, the current naval chief the other day. We had MI6 chief yesterday. We also had the Armed Forces chief. He is the chief of the defence staff. He's the most senior military person in the country, giving a speech, Royal United Services Institute, basically saying we need to do more to deter the threat from Russia. It is a real threat, and it's not just about spending a bit more, which we need to spend a lot more. It's also about a whole of society effort, and our sons and daughters, he says, need to be ready to fight. This as we've got peace talks over Ukraine, but I don't think anyone sensible thinks that we're going to come to a deal which means that Russia's going to go, oh, okay, I'll go back. Putin's just going to give up his expansionist aims. What is the issue here? Is it that we've got politicians with their heads in the sand? Is it that we've got voters who just want to enjoy the Cold War peace dividend for just that another decade if they can? Is it that people don't realise what's going on? What's happening?
It's probably a mix of all of those things, really, isn't it? I think one of the major reasons that you have had the sort of neglect of defence spending for so long, yes, is the end of the Cold War peace dividend, but there's also, combined with that, the fact that even if in their quiet moments they would realise, well, this isn't obviously going to last forever, conflict will return, that is a lesson of history, that it's obviously more politically expedient to spend money in other areas.
Where it shows more instantly. We don't see the spending.
Exactly. And you don't see how necessary defence is until the chips are down, unfortunately.
Though, it's not like you can't just like pop to Sainsbury's and get a pint of milk. You can't just like pop out and get yourself an aircraft carrier. You have to order these things and wait for them to be built, and they take years.
Absolutely. So it's one of those things where it's unfortunately hasn't been within politicians' interest to look at this. Also, this is the thing about kind of NATO, which is it's become almost a disincentive for various countries other than America to invest in their own defence because of the fact that they knew they had backup, the fact that you had various European countries which weren't even making the previous paltry 2% of GDP
Germany
contribution. It's a kind of interesting way in which that was just entirely outsourced, not really thought about. One of the kind of perverse effects of that whole arrangement in many respects. Now you've got a situation where you've got military chiefs or influential people trying to kind of harry the government by kind of ramping up the rhetoric. But it's just quite clear that the penny hasn't dropped with the government, that this is something that they need to prioritise. Even though they formally promised to do so, but they're just not.
But again, this is perhaps more something that perhaps the Tories would have felt more comfortable with. But everyone's been happy to enjoy this peace dividend. And again, in Germany, for years enjoyed the peace dividend. And if you're not spending, very much at all on your defences, and you're just expecting the French and the British and the Americans to come to your defence, and again, a lot of people are very happy with the Germans not having a large military for many years after given what happened in the Second World War. But the reality is, all that money could be spent on healthcare and education and infrastructure. But I don't think we have any choice. And again, I always get messages saying, "Well, you're such a warmonger, you're such a warmonger." I'm not a warmonger. I want to avoid war. I absolutely want, my sons and daughters, our sons and daughters to go to war. I've got 4 young nephews, aged under 5. Do I think it's safe that in the next 20 years they won't be going to war? No, I don't. They're exactly the sort of young men who'll be sent to war if, in the next God knows how many years. We need to start preparing. We need to start being willing. We need to start there's a reason why Finland has a huge reserve army. There's a reason why the Poles are spending a fortune on defence, and the Latvians and the Estonians and the Lithuanians. Why? Because they get it, because they're on the border and they've been invaded before and they know what it's like. And I think it was really interesting what our military historian Elliot Wilson said. Was people think, they're not going to roll their tanks over, are they? Of course they're not. We're an island. Even Adolf Hitler wasn't able to invade our island, but my God, he did a lot of damage. To Britain. I mean, we still find every now and then. I mean, we're looking across to the East End, across the river here from our studio. They're still finding bombs from the Second World War in the East End, the devastation that caused, and the damage to our economy, which we were still paying off, decades later. But also, crucially, there are many other ways to fight wars now. You don't have to send your men over the channel.
Yeah, no, exactly. And the cyber attacks, the kind of low-level warfare that we kind of talk about, all of these things are kind of ushering us into a whole new era.
They can bring our country to an absolute halt with cyber warfare.
So these are things that clearly the game has changed. You don't necessarily need to believe that Russia is on the verge of trying to conquer half of Europe to recognise that national defence is important. Yeah. One of the things that I think is slightly undervalued in the whole question of Ukraine going forward in terms of its own security is that basically the primary security guarantee that Ukraine could ever enjoy is a well-funded and very solid domestic military force. Similarly, it doesn't matter how far away a conflict is. If you're a state that wishes to continue to survive, you need to hope for the best and prepare for the worst. That's just kind of common sense.
That's just how it works.
And as you say, it's not about wanting to kind of ramp these things up, which is why I think sometimes some of the rhetoric about we're going to go to war with Russia tomorrow is not necessarily useful, because it can kind of feed into that kind of sense that it's an inevitability or whatever. But that being said, on its own terms, is defence important? Absolutely. Has it been neglected? Absolutely. Are the politicians going to do anything about it? Probably not.
No, they are not. No one's going to get elected on that. We're going to go to war. I mean, that's the whole point. You should prepare, as you say, not to go to war. Let's also talk about where we are. Well, we are at war with Islamist fascism, because they declared war on us. We don't have a choice. Sorry about that, folks, but they've been at war with us for quite a long time. 2001, 9/11. We had 2005, 7/7 here in the UK. We've had numerous attacks since. Now the attacks have been very much focused recently, the last couple of years, obviously on Jews. But they're, globalise the Intifada ain't just about the Jews. It's about everybody. And when you see people marching on the streets and pro-Palestinian marches saying globalise the Intifada, this is what it means. It means people being slaughtered en masse at a Jewish Hanukkah festival on the beach in Bondi Beach. And that's literally what it means. The Australian authorities are facing lots of questions about why the father and son, this is Sajid and Navid Akram, perhaps were not basically being monitored more closely. Turns out the son, Navid, who's 24, his father died. Good. His son has just come out of a coma. He was critical injuries in hospital, and that he had links with ISIS, that an ISIS flag was found in a car in Bondi Beach along with improvised explosive devices, that he had been influenced by Islamic State ideology. He'd been investigated by Australian authorities some 6 years ago. There's now evidence that both father and son travelled to the Philippines. And it just thought they may have attended a military training camp. That's not known yet, but why else were you randomly in the Philippines? Didn't travel with his wife and or his mum. Travelled just the two of them. Mum, of course, mum stroke wife, knows nothing about any of this, but I mean, not asking many questions, a lot, as we often see in these cases. But we got, once again, same as we've had with so many cases here in the UK. These people are known to security services. They are not the complete, we had no idea. It's like this, there's those kids in the long leather coats who go and shoot up schools in America. We had no idea. He kept himself quiet. He never spoke to anyone, didn't have any friends and stayed at home. Those are the ones you have to worry about.
Quite. And I think it's a reminder that even though at times like this you often hear the standard kind of responses, be vigilant. In societies which have been far from vigilant to this particular threat, the old saw of known to the security services is something that you almost hear every time there is an attack
I think there's barely been any that someone has come
like
out
of the
blue.
Clear blue. It just doesn't happen. And obviously, there's civil liberties concerns. You can't just run a police state because you're trying to keep on top of people who want to get rid of
They'd like to.
freedoms. It's one of the, but at the same time, I refuse to believe that more can't be done to catch these people.
Digital ID? Hi, Tony Blair, if you're watching. I always like to put it, digital ID, that's the answer. If only we had digital ID.
We need a bit more of a kind of whole society response, though, as well, I think. The way in which, by which I mean, as individuals, we need to root out and confront this where we find it. There needs to be a very high social cost to anyone who is engaging in whether it's anti-Semitism, Islamism, whatever.
But there
and also
isn't.
kind of vigilance as society. Like the number of times that people are actually, say in this country, actually referred to counter-radicalisation efforts and just nothing happens. Is telling of how unserious we are about this particular threat. I don't know.
We say we are,
how
the
much it would
authorities
take.
are. I mean, again, we've seen even when, Axel Rudiger-Barner, he had he wasn't a terrorist thing, but he just had rice in, just an explosive device, a poison, a toxin, and he had an Al-Qaeda manual.
Yeah.
I mean, but absolutely not in any way a threat to anybody. I mean, this is the thing, it keeps happening. It's again and again and again. We're just used to it. One of the things that most annoys me, beyond the thoughts and prayers and vigil nonsense, and I'm sorry, I absolutely, my heart goes out to anyone affected, and indeed, Jewish community in Australia and around the world. Their fears are completely legitimate, and people feeling genuinely, nothing is being done about rising anti-Semitism. We're in the 1930s yet again, but in terms of the politicians and the media giving it all the we're so concerned. No, you're not concerned. Otherwise, you'd do something about it, and you'd have the proper conversation. The proper conversation is who is doing this, how are they able to do this, and why are they doing it, and crucially, what will we do to stop them? And then doing it. And it's like thinking, isn't it awful that 14-year-old girls are getting sexually assaulted by illegal migrants arriving on boats from France? Well, if you're worried about that, wouldn't you stop it from happening in the first place by stopping those people being in the country or being free on our streets? And the same with this. I mean, again, I think we need to stop giving people the benefit of the doubt. When people are on the watch list, people are being suspected, I think there's too much benefit of the doubt. And particularly when you're often talking about people who come from migrant families who have dual nationality. They are, and in fact, this guy, the dad who's dead, Naveed Akram, was an Indian citizen, it would appear. I think if someone has got, I mentioned the show yesterday, if someone's a dual national or a foreign national and there is any security doubts about them, I'm sorry, I don't think you have the same rights as a British citizen, and I don't think we can go with balance of probabilities. I think we have doubts about you. I think we ship you home. I'm sorry, I just don't think the risks are worth it anymore. We've imported this problem. We definitely imported the problem. Not that Europe didn't have its own problems with anti-Semitism in the first place, but we've imported Islamofascism, Islamic extremism and that radicalism, and we need to export it.
No, I think that's perfectly fair, and I think it's also quite clear that there just needs to be that kind of higher threshold or lower threshold for when there's intervention. I mean, it's quite obviously part of the problem is the size of the problem. Tens of thousands of people on the watch list.
I think it's 45,000.
40,000 last time I checked on the terrorism watch list.
Probably gone up.
No, exactly. And
I mean, I'd put everyone who's on a pro-Pal march. I would put everybody. If you're on a march where people are shouting, globalise the Intifada, and if you're dancing in the street after people are murdered in a synagogue in Manchester or at a music festival in Israel, or as we've seen people celebrating after the murders on Bondi Beach, I need you to be on the watch list because you are dangerous.
I suppose the difficulty is the watch list is so big you can't keep watch of all of them.
Now this is the thing. So here's the thing. So you can't keep watching all of them.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Then you know what? Then we're going to have you tagged. And the people say we need to get information. No, or if you've got dual nationality or foreign nationality, you're gone. If there have been enough concerns, in the same way, you can't get into America or lots of other countries. They have to. If they could just say no, I don't think so. You haven't got any rights.
Yeah.
If you're not a citizen of this country, okay, we're not going to imprison you. We just don't want you here. You're not our problem. I really think we need to get to that point. I really, really do.
No, and I think people are demanding action. I think and the other thing is that we're kind of at the beginning of this. It's ridiculous to say, but given that we've had more than 2 decades of dealing with this threat on our streets, but we've got to get to the point where people realise, both in society but in the political class more pertinently that this is an imminent danger. This isn't something you can brush off. This isn't something that is one threat amongst many.
No, this is the threat.
94% of all terror-related deaths in this country since 1999 are Islamist terrorism. If you remove the Islamist factor, we would have a fraction of the terror.
And it's a matter of luck that some of these cases are not big. It's a matter of luck that what happened at Heaton Park Synagogue wasn't on a bigger scale. It's a matter of luck. There are cases all the time. I mean, again, I just think, I mean, people need to be ousted from the country. But I also think, here's the thing, we talk about whole society. We also need Muslim so-called self-appointed community leaders. If you are not speaking out on this, I don't mean your average Muslim person going about living their daily lives, same way people of other religions are going about living their daily lives. I mean, if you think you're a leader and you're not just openly the usual platitude nonsense about we condemn these killings. No, you need to be speaking about this in the mosques. You need to be speaking about this at community forums, and you need to be speaking about countering anti-Semitism, countering this Islamo, ideology. This is going on online. It's going on in the mosques. It's going on in the schools. We need to root it out. And if you're not speaking out about it, you're part of the problem. I'm sorry, it's as simple as that. Because if this was happening in the middle-class white women atheist community, I would speak out about it.
And it's difficult because at times like this, there will be the quote-unquote community leaders who will come back and put out a statement and say we condemn extremism. It's got to go further than that. You've got to work out where this is coming from, what particular what scriptural things need to be repudiated. Perfectly frank, what trends within society need to be faced down. You cannot have a situation. If we're going to have a conversation about countering extremism, then mosques in the country should be places in which that is stamped out rather than where it is encouraged.
Exactly.
And this is something that we're.
And if you're not going to stamp it out, then we close you down. I'm sorry. There's no other institution that would be allowed to fester such a dangerous. Again, this isn't about freedom of speech. Your freedom of speech does not extend to, racial and religious hatred and furthering an ideology which basically wants to kill pretty much everybody in the West. Sorry, that's not how. I know you're a free speech absolutist. I ain't. Anyway, 11:29 is the time. We're going to talk to Sheikh Wallace Simons very soon. Get to your calls on Donald Trump, on this, you call in whatever you want to talk about. 0344 499 1000. Your call's up next. This is Talk.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK on DAB+. On YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show. 11:31 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. Ashley's on the line in London and wants to talk about the BBC and Trump suing the BBC for, well, is it 5 billion? Is it 10 billion? What's 5 billion between friends, Ashley?
Oh, well, I mean, what's £5 billion to take out of the public pocket to basically hide what the BBC are up to, I think is more the point, isn't it, really? And well, I think, look, I mean, they can settle with him because they don't want it to go any further.
Well, they say they're going to fight it.
Yeah, well, they probably will for a little bit, and then they're going to realise how much it's going to cost, and then you say, we've gone too far, and we'll settle it. I mean, the reality of it, look, I think Trump, as a person, can't stand the guy, right? I think he's an awful character, right? However, right, irrespective of what you think of him, he has a right to be portrayed in a way that isn't fixed by the narrative of someone cutting a tape to make him look bad. So I think if it was me, I look at it, if it was me, I would be sitting there going, I'm coming after you. You cannot make me look like this. What you've said, right, if it was a little joke, right, you know, if someone's making him look a bit stupid by making fun of him, that's one thing. You know, you've got to take a look at that and think, oh, shut up, get on with it. Right. When you actually look at doing something that incites some form of violence and makes it look like he said that is actually horrific. And you know, just a couple of people going, it should be the production company should have been gone. They should have fired a lot more firings. And if anything comes of this, if any good comes of this, would be that they realise that they've actually got to clean up their act.
No, I don't think it will. They genuinely, they genuinely don't really think they do anything wrong, and they absolutely categorically. I had that conversation with Tim Davey myself. I talked about it on air. They genuinely do not believe that there is any bias at the BBC. They are utterly delusional. But yeah, I'm with you. I don't matter whether you like someone or dislike someone. They've got a right to be accurately portrayed. And again, if he had actually called for that insurrection, he'd have faced criminal charges already in America, and he has not. That's a bit of a giveaway, isn't it? Ashley, thank you for that call. Carl's on the line. He's in Liverpool. And Carl, you want to talk about the latest on the Bondi Beach attacks?
Hi, Julie.
Hi.
Good morning.
Morning.
Yeah, what a god-awful attack it was. But what's really, not really surprised me, but made me feel sick to the stomach is all these people that are coming out on Twitter and whatever socials they have, you know, glorifying, chanting death and all this sort of thing to the Jewish community. I want all these people, Julie, I want them all locked up, because if people can get locked up when Labour got in for hurty words of such, these people are glorifying death and chanting for it. Now, these are the same people, by the way, that would want myself as a veteran to protect them if we went back to war.
Oh, yes.
These are those same people. So my point to these people was, if you don't shut up, you go to prison. This is how we need to be now. I believe in freedom of speech, but I don't think freedom of speech extends not in that way, Julia. I believe in freedom of speech.
They're inciting and encouraging violence against people because of their religious beliefs. Now, I'm sorry, that's unacceptable in a free country.
It is. And just another point on Sadiq Khan wanting to cancel that was the just to let people know there was a vigil outside Parliament last night, and of course it was dark, you know, long before the vigil started. And we are told that the clipboard people working for Sadiq Khan tried to cancel it because it was dark. Yeah, well, that's just an excuse. That man needs to be kicked out of that job ASAP. I've got so many words that I can't say on radio.
He's democratically elected, Carl.
He is, but by the people who've elected him, they must be looking and go, well, you look at what we're dealing with and look at the state of the city.
I thought that last time round, but then it didn't seem to work. But there we are, Carl. I appreciate and I understand your anger. Thank you very much indeed. Well, coming up, we're going to talk to Jake Wallace-Simons about that Bondi Beach attack, the latest on there. And when will politicians wake up and tackle the root cause? This is Talk, the home of common sense.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Back to the show, 11:37 is the time. Let's go straight to Jake Wallace-Simons now. He's author of Never Again, How the West Betrayed the Jews and Itself. Good morning to you, Jake.
Good morning.
Thank you very much, Steve, for joining us. Wish we were talking under happier circumstances, but obviously not in the wake of that Bondi Beach terrible attack. The aftermath of that, very predictably, guess what? The father and son, known to the authorities, it appears they have to fit the Philippines in the last month or so, possibly for some military training. The son, Naveed Akram, who's currently in hospital and has woken from his coma. He's been critically injured when he was captured by the police. It turns out, believed to have been influenced by Islamic State ideology. An ISIS flag found in the car along with improvised explosive devices near where they were shooting to innocent Jewish people celebrating Hanukkah on the beach at Bondi. Yet again, the authorities, they were aware of somebody, they were a concern, and then they decided they weren't a risk and carried on. This has happened time and time and time again around the world and indeed in the UK, hasn't it?
Yeah, to me, it feels like the same things going on as happened with the grooming gangs, where the authorities were too worried about being accused of Islamophobia to actually take action against crimes that they saw were unfolding clearly before their very eyes. They doubted the evidence of their own eyes because they worried they were being Islamophobic. And I think that that's what holds us back a lot of the time in society, even though our police and security services do an absolutely brilliant job a lot of the time and have saved multiple lives, often in response to tip-offs from Mossad, it has to be said, which gives us a lot of assistance in countering these sorts of threats on our shores across the West. Nonetheless, there is, in our culture, there is this sense that we are Islamophobic unless proven otherwise. Yeah. And I think that people doubt themselves so much. I'm reminded of Kyle Lawler, the security guard in the Manchester Arena bombing, who saw Salman Abedi walking in with that heavy backpack and said, I can't stop him. He looks dodgy. I can't say anything because I'm being Islamophobic. And then, of course, 22 people were killed in that ensuing attack. So I think that people... the police are human beings, and they are often, criticised and even facing disciplinary procedures because they are allegedly, racist, prejudiced, Islamophobic. And so they're worried about that. And that often, I think, holds them back from doing their jobs properly and keeping us all safe.
Absolutely. Again, this whole, wrong think idea has completely dominated so much of the thinking. And that's why we ended up with, thousands upon thousands of girls being gang raped routinely and nothing being done about it because of that wrong fear of wrong thing, and it's why we've ended up with the growth of anti-Semitism in this country, which I think has been absolutely shocking. Now look. And we've seen across the West. It's happening in America, it's happening in Canada, it's happening in Australia, it's happening across Europe. We see it again and again and again. It's happening on our campuses, it's happening in the left wing. We've always had the right wing anti-Semitic, but now we've got it, of course, having imported it. So is Australia, again, literally, physically importing anti-Semitism in the form of radical Islam. What do we do about it? Because we have 4 million people in this country who are of Muslim faith, and the vast majority of them will be living completely peacefully, minding their own business, is getting up and going to work, taking the kids to school just like everybody else. However, we have a minority, but it's a very, very, very large minority of that population who hold views which are diametrically opposed to the values of this country, and views which, and a smaller minority, views which are, I would say, dangerous to people in this country, and we don't seem to be doing anything about it.
That's right. There's a spectrum of objectionable views within the Muslim community, from people who are totally on board with us all the way through to people who are jihadis. And I think the first step we need to take is, as Nigel Farage has pledged to do, is to ban the Muslim Brotherhood and enforce that ban with ruthlessness, so that that extremist organisation, which lies at the root of all the jihadi networks around the world historically, is expunged from our societies.
Explain who they are to people who don't spend their time looking at this stuff in depth. Who are the Muslim Brotherhood, and why are they so dangerous?
I think for many people, the Muslim Brotherhood is the biggest jihadi organisation that you've never heard of. It was started in the 20s as radical Muslim, politicized Islamic organisation. And from it came Hamas, came Al-Qaeda, came the Islamic State, and even came the Iranian regime, the current Iranian regime. So it's this sort of petri dish for all the worst people in our world, all the most rabid and bloodthirsty jihadis. And the thing is that its philosophy looks at overturning the West to impose Sharia law upon us, and only resorting to bloodshed if it has to in a last resort. What it prefers to do is get its people in positions of power and influence our politics, influence our civil society, influence our institutions, so that before we know it, they've dominated our society by using the levers of an open society against us. Now, it's important to say that this organisation is banned across the Middle East. It's banned in Egypt, it's banned throughout the Gulf, because they know how dangerous these people are. So all it's done is move its centre of gravity over to here in Britain and elsewhere in the West. And this is where it's trying to operate now.
There'll be people who'll say that all just sounds like a conspiracy theory, Jake.
Well, it sounds like a conspiracy theory, but don't take my word for it. Take the government's word for it. In 2015, two very distinguished senior civil servants with security experience, Charles Farr and Sir John Jenkins, produced a government report which laid all this out, calling the Muslim Brotherhood a danger to national security. That was 10 years ago, almost 11 years ago now. Nothing was done. We need to get real.
Why isn't it done?
It isn't done. Well, I mean, the Tories, were about to do it before they unwisely called that early election, were dumped
they had 14
from power.
years.
But they still had years upon years to act. I think that, the Muslim Brotherhood and their operatives are very good at making us believe that we are Islamophobic and shouting as soon as we try to criticise them, saying that we're being Islamophobic, using libel laws, using the laws of press regulators to stifle resistance to them while they continue their advance through our societies. And that's really cowed our politicians and prevented them from taking proper action.
It is quite alarming, isn't it? And let's also talk about some other people who don't get banned, pro-Palestinian marchers, activists and others who celebrate. We saw the, horrific celebrations on our streets. October the 8th, already, in fact, even on actual October the 7th, after the attacks on Israel. We saw celebrations after the Heaton Park synagogue attack in which 2 people died. People openly dancing and cheering in the streets about this. We've seen these pro-Palestinian marches again and again. And yesterday, what a surprise, we did see, once again, activists chanting, "Long live the Intifada," hours after the Bondi attack, celebrating and cheering. This keeps on going on and nothing happens. Now, again, we talk about freedom of speech a lot on this show. There's a line that needs to be drawn, but I suppose people have a right to celebrate whatever they want, even if we disagree with them. But some of the marches, some of the chants, globalise the Intifada. What did people think it meant? It meant kill Jews worldwide. That's what's been happening, whether it's Heaton Park and Synagogue, or whether it's in Bondi Beach, or whether it's a Christmas market or whatever in Germany, killing Jews and killing the infidel. That's what it means.
Yeah, as Karl Popper famously said, if we extend unlimited tolerance to the intolerant, then the tolerant will be done away with and tolerance with them. And that's what we're facing at the moment. If we want to protect our open, free society, we've got to get wise to the people who are trying to manipulate our freedoms, to destroy our free society from within. And that means, calling a spade, calling an enemy an enemy. I'm not saying Muslims are enemies, but I'm saying that the extremists within their societies that keep them under its grip are enemies. They need to be ruthlessly repressed, imprisoned, deported, and moderate Muslims will be then free from that influence and can then be embraced.
This is one of the key things, isn't it? Because actually, we have got an awful lot of people who are here in this country who are Muslims who would probably be very, very grateful to have that radical ideology ousted.
Look, tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of Muslims fought for our country in both the world wars, died for our country. There's nothing about Muslims that means they can't integrate and be on our side. Absolutely. They have been in the past, they will be in the future. But these extremists who are dominating their communities, intimidating them, preventing them from speaking out in our favour, and then presenting themselves as representatives of the community and trying to force through definitions of Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hatred, whatever, to prevent us criticising them and enable their advance through our institutions, they need to be stopped. Yeah. And the speed at which those demonstrations, anti-Israel demonstrations, began on October the 7th is testament to how organised and prepared they are. And we saw it again, as you said, in Oxford, just on the day of the attacks in Bondi Beach, chanting "Globalise the Intifada" in alliance with these idiot students at the most prestigious university in the world, coming out onto the streets, spreading their immorality and lack of ethics against our own societies. They need to be re-educated, to use a Marxist term. But first of all, we need to get rid of these extremists. Enough is enough.
Absolutely. I mean, again, an awful lot of them, frankly, in our parliament right now, and supporting major political parties. The normalisation of many of these views, I think, is particularly terrifying. The Labour donor Dale Vince used to be on the show, hasn't come on the show for a while, don't know why he's for it, but there we are. He's provoked something of a backlash, calls for Keir Starmer to denounce him and to just, hand back his money or refuse to take more money. He gave more than £5 million to the Labour Party in the last year. He said that anti-Semitism had been fuelled by Israel committing genocide in Palestine, and he basically appeared to blame Israel for the Bondi Beach massacre. Commenting on the shootings in Australia today, he said Netanyahu said anti-Semitism spreads when leaders stay silent. And he writes, nothing to do with Israel committing genocide in Palestine then. Netanyahu wants anti-Semitism to be a thing. It validates him. He acts to make it so. I mean, he goes, and if anti-Semitism is rising in the world today, then surely on any rational analysis, the biggest single cause of that will be the genocide in Palestine. I mean, it's Gaza, it wasn't a genocide, isn't a genocide, but also anti-Semitism has been on the rise for a much longer time, and that anti-Semitism was blatantly on display before a single rocket was fired by the IDF. But this blaming of Israel for the acts of gunmen on Bondi Beach against Jewish Australian Jews, that is anti-Semitism by any stretch of the imagination, is it not?
Well, listen, Mr. Vince, anti-Semitism was a thing long before Netanyahu was born, I can tell you that. For thousands of years, the Holocaust was a thing before Netanyahu was born. You can't blame Netanyahu for anti-Semitism, and you can't blame Israel's attempts to defend itself for the backlash or as for some sort of spurious backlash against Jews. The fact is that anti-Semitism always starts with demonization of Jews. Once you make them out to be demons, then any kind of moral society has to deal with them by rubbing them out. That is the logic of Hitler. He said that Jews were a cancer they had to be got rid of because of the effect on our societies. That was the logic of medieval anti-Semites, saying Jews killed Christ, they're a bad influence, we've got to get rid of them. And if you wrongly say and falsely say that Jews are guilty of genocide, you're doing the same thing as Hitler did. You're exaggerating any normal war into an act of depraved evil. You're casting Jews as genocidal, as satanic, and then the next step has got to be to erase them. So ironically, Dale Vince is doing exactly what Hitler tried to do, which is to demonize Jews as a prelude to their destruction. He's justifying the terrorist attacks against them by demonizing them. That's exactly what Hitler did.
But again, it's okay to shoot a 10-year-old girl on the beach in Australia, because of Israel, because of Jews. I mean,
don't make it a thing.
Sorry. I wish you'd stop making it a thing, Jake. You're just making it all up, aren't you? Jake Wallace-Simons, so appreciate you joining us. I really appreciate that, your time. Thank you very much. 11:50 is the time. Listening to all that is Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. I mean, I think Jake has been fantastic on this, and his book, Never Again, is absolutely brilliant. And he's been a long-time foreign correspondent as well. He knows his stuff. But it really is extraordinary, the normalisation on universities, in Parliament, Labour Party donors like Dale Vince, and frankly, BBC, we come back to them again, just normalising stuff which is blatantly nice and subtle sometimes, blatantly not subtle many other times, anti-Semitism.
No, absolutely. And it was on the rise well before October the 7th.
Hi, Corbyn.
Quite. Even before the horrific events of that pogrom in southern Israel, Jews were being menaced by this growing anti-Semitism, predominantly Muslim anti-Semitism, but not exclusively. Again, even before the horrific events of that day, Jews are 0.5% of the population in this country. They were the victims, a quarter of all religiously motivated hate crimes.
Tells you something.
Absolutely. So this is something which has exploded since, but the writing's been on the wall for some time, and people like Jake just weren't listened to.
Exactly. Coming up, we're going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking about the millions of drivers who've been wrongly fined for speeding on motorways and A roads because of faulty speed cameras. We're also going to be taking a closer look later on at the sentencing of the Liverpool parade driver Paul Doyle after those extraordinary revelations in the court summing up yesterday. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Morning, welcome back to the show, 11:54. Let's talk about getting fined for speeding, because I said earlier it was millions, but it's tens of thousands of innocent motorists who've been clocked for speeding due to a fault with every speed, not just some, every speed camera on smart motorways across the UK. Let's talk about this with Edward Atkinson. He's a senior solicitor at Freeman & Co. A very good morning to you, Edward.
Morning.
Thank you for joining us. So, OK, what is this fault and how has it led to so many people getting wrongly fined?
Well, the fault stems from the way in which the cameras operate. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Oh, forgive me. I'm sorry. I couldn't hear my feedback. Yeah, the fault stems from the cameras and the way they operate. Essentially, what should happen is that when the speed limit changes on the camera, normally down, say from 60 to 50, the law requires that there is a 10-second period whereby a person cannot be convicted of a speeding offence. So it's just
because they need time to brake and obey the sign they've just seen. Yes,
quite, and it's to avoid people braking sharply as the signs change. Yep. So the way the cameras are supposed to work is that for 10 seconds after the sign changes, the camera adjusts its monitoring to the lower speed limit, but doesn't record offences for at least 10 seconds. Operationally, I've been told by experts that it's as long as a minute before they come into force.
Good to know.
Yes, exactly. It appears that the new update that's been brought in 2021 took away that 10-second moratorium.
Right.
And people in that period were being prosecuted or sent fixed penalties and so on. And of course, members of the public, when they get a notice, they trust the police and they trust the authorities that what they're being told is accurate. Yeah. And they act accordingly.
So how did we find out, or anyone find out that there was this issue? Did the authorities just fess up, or did someone challenge it in court and found out?
Well, it appears that the authorities didn't fess up until somebody did challenge it in court.
Shocker.
What a surprise.
But these were people. It's not like the camera was faulty and they were speeding and they should have got done, but on a technicality they're getting off. These were people who were obeying the speed limit, and then the speed limit went down, and then they were clocked when they had every right to still be slowing down to the next speed limit. But I mean, so people, we're told that there could be compensation, but 40% of cameras on motorways and A roads had the fault. So, in terms of people, are they going to get their money back? What's going to happen? Are they going to be able to sue?
Well, potentially, yes. I mean, the ramifications of this are really far-reaching.
I can feel you rubbing your hands with glee there at Freeman & Co.
Possibly. The number of cameras, it says a lot that on the strategic motorway network and on the A roads there are 4,500 cameras, and 40% of the whole network of these HADEX cameras.
Yeah.
The window is quite narrow in terms of the 10-second period and who would be caught by that. But you have to think about the consequences of a speeding conviction. It could be that someone's disqualified from driving, which means they may lose their job.
Yeah.
It could be certain jobs, driving jobs, require that you have no more than 6 points or less than 6 points. People could lose their livelihoods. It isn't just about 3 points and paying the fine.
Again, it's one of those things when you're driving along and you find someone and they're doing 29, you think, I know perfectly well you've got 9 points in your licence right now. I'm kind of the view, if you've got 9 points in your licence, you kind of, I'm not that sympathetic. I'm not sure I want you on the roads anyway. But I mean, there's speeding on a motorway, and again, there's a difference between someone doing 100 on a motorway or someone doing, I don't know, 75, isn't there? I mean, there just is.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, one of my personal bugbears is that the number of speed cameras we have is so high now, and they operate in such an arbitrary way that really and truly, the number of offences I see at 24 and a 20 in London that are prosecuted, and you think to yourself, well, if a police officer had been driving behind that car, may they have stopped them? Probably not. And if they did, would they really prosecute a driver? Can you really tell the difference between 20 and 24 as you're driving along, watching the traffic and all the other things?
But I suppose the argument is we know the law, we can agree. I mean, I think what most people would feel is if you're going to enforce that law, can we enforce all the other laws as well? No one minds if all laws are enforced. It's when we see you can shoplift, you can ride basically a motorbike effect along the pavement and no one does anything about it, even when the police are standing there. But people are being done for being a few miles per hour over, even on a busy road or an open road in the middle of the night. But people they'll be getting their money back. So that's a good thing. But the main thing here is you can't always trust the technology. And if you think that you're in the right, you didn't do anything wrong, do always question these things. Edward Atkinson, Senior Solicitor at Freeman & Co. Very much appreciate you joining us for that. Again, this is the problem with all this camera technology and all the technology we've got on everything and, supposed to get criminals as well. It's not always that reliable, is it? Coming up, we are going to be talking to Lord McKinley, the Conservative peer. Talked to him about lots of the big stories doing the rounds today. And love to get your thoughts on everything as well. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. Thank you very much for your company. This is Talk, the home of common sense, and I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device, thank you as always for taking the time to watch and to listen. I'm with you all the way until 1 o'clock. Delighted to say Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, is also with me. Coming up, we are going to be talking more about Donald Trump and that $10 billion lawsuit against the BBC. Doctors going ahead with their strikes as of 7 o'clock tomorrow morning, despite the flu outbreak. And we're also going to be talking more about the horrific case of the former Royal Marine Paul Doyle, who basically rammed his car into people celebrating Liverpool's a victory parade back in May. And the evidence that came out in court from the prosecutor in his 2-day sentencing hearing, it's ongoing again today, absolutely horrific, even as he was hitting, innocent men, women, children, prams, for goodness sake. He was just shouting, "Get out of the effing way," angered by people being in the way, rather than remorseful, and certainly not fearful for his life as he had originally claimed. Thank God for that dash cam footage, to actually prove what really went on in that car. Tom Slater, thank you again once again for joining us. Going to be talking to Lord McKinley about some of the biggest stories in the news today, but just want to start with you on junior doctors. Ignoring calls to scrap this 5-day strike. Wes Street, the Health Secretary, very much ramping up. This is, this is the worst possible week to do it. Put the strike in January. They've offered a deal. The government, they've had a 29% pay rise. They want another 26% pay rise. Obviously, this is over a period of years, but way out of skew from what other public sector workers and certainly private sector workers are getting. But a lot of the issues are about training availability and the cost of all the exams and things that these medical students have. And there'd be lots of offers on that front, but the BMA is basically saying no, we're going ahead. They've had a vote. They've had more than, I think it was about 2/3 of doctors voted, and the majority voted to go ahead with the strike, despite the outbreak of flu and a huge number of cases in the hospitals. Is this? I mean, is it fair for doctors to continue to strike as they've chosen to, or is it now morally wrong for them to do so?
I think it's unsustainable. I think it's clear that they haven't been able to land the case with the public or with enough even of the health service. I mean, if you talk to people who work in the health service who aren't, resident doctors or junior doctors, what we're supposed to be calling them these days, they feel like they're trying it, to put it lightly. And it's one of those things where, are there some legitimate grievances in there? Absolutely. But at the same time, having had that near 30% pay rise not too long ago, given the fact that many other people, even in the public sector, let alone the private sector, as we've been talking about the disparity in pay growth between those two things, have not received the kinds of rewards that they have, it's people's patience is wearing a bit thin. And it's an unfortunate reality that when it comes to industrial reaction in the health service, it will have a particular impact. It will cost lives. It continues to go on because people do have the right to strike. But there is an extra moral responsibility, therefore, surely, to ensure that it's not something which is either frivolous or doomed to fail. And it's feeling like it's certainly the latter.
I think there's a big question mark just about they're doing their own PR very badly as well. Tom Slater, thank you for that. Well, let's talk about that and many other topics now with my next guest, Conservative peer, as was the Conservative MP, now Lord McKinley. Very good afternoon to you, Craig.
Well, all the greetings of Christmas to you, Julia.
Thank you very much. I've got my Christmas tree behind me. I didn't have it yesterday. We were talking about Bondi Beach, and I felt I'm not sure a Christmas tree is where I want to go. But today, I think we're a bit more chirpy about all the disasters going on in the country and in the world. But it's a very welcome season's greetings to you, good sir, too. Let me ask you about the doctor's strike there, because Wes Streeting, I mean, he's not pulling his punches, the Health Secretary. He's basically talking about, this is the political, the prospect of, he said they're not going to, it's political not to say they're going to ban strikes, but he has basically said that we are looking at a moment of maximum danger for patients. There's no doubt when there are doctor strikes, patients do die. We've got a flu crisis ongoing, lots of ramping up of that. What do you make of the decision to go ahead with that strike?
Well, Wes has been fairly robust, and if you recall back before the election, they went to the electorate saying, "Oh well, we will solve all these things because we're so nice."
So it was and it was so easy.
And easy. They threw 29% at the junior doctors, resident doctors, or whatever the old money was, and 29% over a 2-year package, and still they're on strike. Now, I just ask myself, you've got 15,000 youngsters who had some very, very good A-levels, who would have loved to be in their shoes and training as doctors. There are no shortage of people who want to do it. These young doctors knew the pathway they were on, and they also knew that they would get better and better pay over time as their career progresses. They would be building up a beautiful gold-plated NHS pension. There is nothing hidden about what they got themselves into. They have a right to strike, but I wonder about their moral fibre now. They know this is a critical period. We've got flu problems. We do every year. The volume of beds are pretty much full up. And we're in the prospect now of older people not being released for Christmas. They could be spending time with
because
their
there's not going to be anyone to sign them off. But there has been quite a lot of catastrophising, I think, about what's going on in terms of the flu, epidemic. I mean, look, we get flu most years. When we don't have COVID, we get flu. Back only 7 years ago, 25,000 people sadly died of flu. This is what happens, I'm afraid. And we should always be very careful not to infect our, elderly loved ones. We know children are also at risk from flu in a way they weren't from COVID. But there has been a ramping up and a catastrophisation. Oh, the NHS is close to collapse and the doctor striking. There's a lot of politicisation around this as well.
Well, yeah, we're seeing a lot of those hyperbolic sort of language and ridiculousness that we saw at the early days of COVID.
Oh, yes.
Schools closed.
Are you wearing your mask when you go on the public transport?
I haven't worn my mask and I don't intend to. But you've got the masks are back. And they're being seen a bit more regularly. I mean, if people want to wear them, do what you like in life. But I mean, we're getting a similar sort of state of hysteria and language. And yes, we have got a normal flu outbreak. And the figures are, you've got that peak, but it's no more of a peak than we saw in years past. But yes, of course, Wes has reached for that. And I don't blame him for trying to reach for a lever of trying to pluck the heartstrings of these resident doctors to say, please, we're here to help. We respect what you do. We love our NHS or whatever we're calling it this week. Please just do the decent thing that you trained for and have some thoughts for the people you're meant to be supporting. So on a moral basis, quite frankly, Julia, I am appalled by what.
I'm wondering whether you were appalled about the BBC deciding to just, let's face it, make up what Donald Trump said at a speech in Washington on January the 6th, 2021, after he was claiming that he'd had the 2020 election stolen from him. That was a false claim, of course, but the BBC seemed to think that's somehow a justification for their entirely false claim of splicing two different clips of his speech together, 54 minutes apart, for a panorama documentary that went out just a week before the 2024 presidential election, which, of course, Donald Trump won. He has now announced that he's suing the BBC. Various court documents say $10 billion or $5 billion, but it's $5 billion certainly for defamation, another $5 billion on another case. But he talked about $1 billion previously. No one thinks he's going to get 5, 10 or $1 billion. The BBC say they're going to defend themselves. Should they settle? Should they spend a penny of licence fee money because they don't have any money that we haven't provided to them, defending themselves on this?
Well, I tell you what, Julia, I mean, what they did was gratuitously foul. This has been some clever little cabal within the BBC have thought, aren't we lovely and clever? And they've spliced together two completely bits of film to make it sound like he was sort of promoting a riot, which in the cold light of day now, he obviously was not. And the fact that it was broadcast just a few days before an election in America, and, let's be very honest, the world does not have borders of where output goes anymore. It goes everywhere. It was foul and disgusting. And do you know what I'm most annoyed about? Is that they're now resorting to our BBC, a bit like our NHS, as if this is some national treasure that can do no wrong. Do you know what I'm really annoyed about? Is that the BBC could have been a real global player, a go-to place for proper news that's independent and all of those good things that the BBC charges.
And they threw it away.
But they've thrown that away, and people like me who've always supported them are now in the realms of saying, do you know what, BBC, I'm sorry to say, I think your time has come. If this is the best you can do and you can't clean your act up, then perhaps it's time for your demand.
But their defence is, look, it was an independent production company, it'd been one editor, they weren't aware of it, although we've seen, the most senior figure, the Director General of the BBC, Tim Davies, gone, and also the Director of News at the BBC as well. But whenever they talk about this stuff, and senior figures, they insist there is no institutional bias in the BBC. They don't think they've done anything wrong. Their defence is apparently going to be that, well, we expect from what lawyers are saying that, well, it didn't actually damage his character because, look what he's already said in terms of, basically rousing Trump supporters against the election result. I mean, if they don't think that what they did was a problem, even though people have resigned, but because there really wasn't any choice but to resign, then there's no hope that they're going to change, is there?
Well, no, if they can't accept themselves that what they did was just just an attempt to smear a character, whether they like him or not, it's not the BBC's role to like him or not. It's
No,
BBC's
exactly.
role is to report impartially. And it wasn't just done once on that Panorama show, it was done again on a Newsnight some time afterwards. So it wasn't one freak accident and somebody wasn't looking in the right thing. This happened twice. Now, I think the BBC have now accepted in many things that they're not doing correctly, and you have to extend that to their coverage of Gaza and Palestine, and also within my ambit of interest is the whole climate issue, because it's so obvious that the way they, if you have high winds, it's climate change. Get a bit more snow, climate change. Windy, climate change. A bit of hot weather, climate change. Whatever you fancy, it's down to climate change.
Any weather disaster anywhere around the world, even when the experts are really clear, whether it's a flooding, whether it's a hurricane, every single time. And literally experts are going, no, that's not true. There's flooding every year and has been since time immemorial, etc., etc.
Well, I don't think it's just Trump. I think it's across a whole range of issues they are now found wanting. And me, as a British person who's paid my BBC licence, who has sort of treasured its output over many years, they have failed me and many others.
You're done. Can I say, talking of the net zero side of things, I imagine you rather welcomed, and as a Conservative, former Conservative MP, Kemi Badenoch, your leader, announcing this week, basically dumping not just re-looking at net zero policies, but dumping an awful lot of net zero policies, ending those subsidies for electric vehicles, and ending that we're planning to scrap the ban that was due to come in 2030 on the sale of new petrol or diesel, even hybrid cars. Now, you and I have been saying for a very long time, A, this was a dumb policy, and B, that this policy would not survive contact with reality. We know the EU is looking at, removing their ban or delaying it. The form so far has been delaying these things until they're sort of politically kicked into the backwater. But do you welcome this complete change of policy from Kemi Badenoch?
Well, not really confidence, actually, Julia. When I was ill in St Thomas's Hospital, having just had my arms and legs amputated, I organised a rebellion against the statutory instrument that was going to introduce all this.
God, we love you for this.
And it was the biggest rebellion under Rishi's regime to actually try and stop this ridiculous ban on normal cars that we all know and love, and introduce EVs as a compulsion. Isn't it strange? Here we are. The Conservative Party has changed, and I'm very pleased that it has on many issues, ECHR, many of the net zero issues, and here we are with EVs. And
it's funny, if they'd changed before the last election, they might still be in power.
Well, they might well have been, but it's funny, isn't it? It's reality always wins at the end of the day. I haven't got anything particularly against EVs, but they should be like any other product. If they're good, they'll sell themselves.
Exactly.
If they're not very good, I won't buy one.
And how much do you trust Kemi Badenoch's version? I tweeted about this when the government, the Conservative Party, put out this policy change, and I went, oh, come on, you were the guys who brought in the ban. That's the thing. It's very frustrating. They get a personal message from someone very, very, very senior in the Conservative Party saying, oh, but hold on a minute, Kemi Badenoch didn't support a lot of these policies in government. Well, she did speak out on something, some things were leaked, but was she enough of a vocal opponent to these policies, either within Cabinet, as far as you're aware, or campaigning outside, to actually try and change these policies? Because a lot of people feel like it's all very well, so now you're basically taking some scraps from Reform and following their policies.
Well, taking some scraps from McKinley, say. Let's But no, I do think Kemi does actually believe these things. I mean, obviously, you don't know what goes on behind the doors of Cabinet, but I suppose people have to make a choice in life. They either stick with it and have to vote for some things they perhaps at the time don't like, so they can stay in the game and have some influence, or they use the card once, which I'm afraid is probably why I was never a minister. You can use the card once and say, I'm not going to support that, and flounce out. But that's something you can only play once. So it's a little bit more of a complex game than it first appears.
Can I ask you just about Labour, just very briefly as well, because we've had Keir Starmer appeared at the liaison committee of MPs for an hour and a half yesterday, and again, I mean, again, I try and watch these things, but you know what? Sleep always calls to me. What can I say? But it's very interesting that it's one person who never puts me to sleep is the just outrageous comments of Dale Vince. He's also, again, somebody who's been, what a surprise, has made millions from the subsidies from net zero. But yesterday he basically blamed Israel for the Bondi Beach massacre and basically said that Netanyahu, because of actions in Gaza, responsible. And he said basically that Netanyahu wants anti-Semitism to be a thing. It validates him. He acts to make it so, as if anti-Semitism somehow isn't a thing, despite all the evidence to the contrary. Dale Vince, sports his kafir, has basically the politics of the sixth former, and we see, people pro-Palestinian marches. We've seen activists celebrating and dancing and shouting "Globalised Intifada" at Oxford University and everywhere else, and this all carrying on. This man there is given £5 million to the Labour Party. Keir Starmer claims that he's very much doing everything he can to root out anti-Semitism, and yet he's taking money from a man who is basically saying, "Is it a thing?"
Well, you'll excuse me if I don't blast into Dale Vince too much, because he has a tendency to issue writs all over the place, and there's quite a number of
you can issue one any time to me.
Very many friends and colleagues. So, I didn't particularly want a writ for Christmas, but I'm afraid he's like many on the left. They can't sort of help themselves on the whole subject of anti-Semitism. They just sort of make this relationship between how you can make relationship of the Hanukkah Christmas party on Bondi Beach, people with children enjoying themselves for a holiday that means a lot to them, how that can be conflated with what a government somewhere else in Israel, that you may agree with or not, is doing, is a leap that I can't even fathom. Yeah. But I'm afraid we do see this with the left, and Dale Vince is obviously of the left because he's given £5.5 million to the Labour Party over recent years. I can only guess much of it made on the back of a lot of net zero stuff. So we got a lot that we don't agree on, myself and Dale Vince. We've been on media shows together, had various shouting matches about net zero, but I've avoided a writ thus far. But I had this in my constituency. We had a factory, an arms factory, that was Israeli owned, and many of the same sort of characters with their their daft scarves on were doing demonstrations, smashing windows, and all the rest of it. And I just, for many companies, and I put Ben and Jerry's in a similar sort of camp. They can't sort of help themselves. Just sell damned ice cream, and Dale just sell your electricity and whatever other companies think they need. Was it Budweiser and their whole ridiculous transit they put their feet into?
We're not interested in your politics, but I think they've got a right to do it. But we've got a right to call them out on it.
Enjoy products. If you want to do politics, stand for election.
Lord McKinley, Craig McKinley, Conservative, thank you very much indeed. 12:20 is the time. Tom Slater's listening to all that. Editor's Fight Online. I mean, it's not the biggest story of the day. Again, I kind of want to slap myself in the face for sort of any conversations we're having about what Donald Trump has said on social media or what Dale Vince has said on social media. I mean, but it does matter, because these are sort of grown up supposedly in the room, and they lead they mainstream views, and Dale Vince mainstreaming this view that anti-Semitism not actually a thing. It's kind of invented by Netanyahu because Jewish Israel victimhood. I mean, seriously?
And he's been rightly hauled over the coals for it. And just because it's on Twitter doesn't mean it's not a significant public intervention from a very influential person. I just wish there weren't so many people who make that leap, as Craig was talking about. There weren't so many people.
Useful idiots, let me call them.
And this is the thing. Sometimes it's an idiocy, I think, is the point. Because
there's a difference in having a different opinion on things, isn't there? And then you're actually making arguments. If you're saying there's a genocide in Gaza, you're an idiot, because the facts are very clearly against that.
And it's one of those things where even if they've stumbled into this issue and this conflict a little bit late in the day, the amount of conviction, let alone nonsense, let alone dangerous nonsense, which is being spewed by people who should know better, at least to say, maybe I shouldn't hold forth on this because it's a very important issue.
Indeed.
And yet people don't have that filter, do they?
And I do wonder about Keir Starmer and his he talks a good game, and of course his wife and her family are Jewish, and he does talk a good game. But I'd given a speech outside Downing Street after the Heaton Park synagogue murders. talking about, there's only one person who could do something about a lot of this, and it is Starmer. And I do just think, people can talk a good game. So you can talk a good game about defending Ukraine, you can talk a good game about tackling anti-Semitism, you can talk a game about tackling violence against women and girls. If you don't actually do anything practical, when, the people who are telling you, here are some really clear practical things you can do and spend money on that will make a difference, and when you don't do them, and when you accept money from people who go around sporting kafir, and I mean, you can wear what you sodding well want, but but when you're just playing student politics, dangerous student politics. And bearing in mind, let's not forget that Keir Starmer spent 3 years as Shadow Brexit Secretary, 2016, 2019, basically quite happy to try and elect Jeremy Corbyn as Prime Minister of this country. And imagine how dangerous that would have been. Do you think a lot of this wariness of Keir Starmer to actually do anything? The Liaison Committee, if anyone was able to stay awake for it yesterday, being questioned by select committee chairs, his constant refrain was, well, you can't get anything done, you pull a lever and nothing happens. And as one of our guests earlier pointed out, Tony Blair complained about this. You can't get anything done. This is why Prime Ministers routinely love to go to foreign affairs, because you could do things, you could grandstand, and it's so much easier than domestic politics and the nitty-gritty of cutting welfare spending or sorting out the NHS or whatever it is. And he complained about this almost exactly a year ago, exactly the same thing. You can't get anything done. But you've got a massive majority in Parliament. You can get anything done you want to get done. That's the whole point of getting a big majority. That's why a lot of people want, reform, if they either get a big majority or they work with the Tories, to be able to have enough of a majority they can get stuff done and move things on. How much of this, you think, is that he is so wary of upsetting anybody in his party, or any backbenchers, or even his own cabinet, because he's so weak right now? Lots of talk in the papers at the weekend about this threat from Andy Burnham, the King up north, the Mayor of Greater Manchester, and the possibility that he could now, with his allies on the National Executive Committee, Lucy Powell, the new deputy leader of the party, and others, that he will be able to get himself a seat ahead of or at the local elections in May, and then at that point he's back in Parliament. He can be an alternative leader. No one seems to think that Keir Starmer's going to be still here next summer.
No, not at all. I mean, and the only thing that would really kind of helping him is the lack of viable alternatives. So Andy Burnham potentially throwing his hat into the ring changes that.
Although twice rejected by Labour Party members.
Well, quite, but there's the fact that we're talking about Andy Burnham and Ed Miliband is quite fascinating, isn't it? Two people, one person who did get the leadership and then failed miserably at an election, another person who tried and failed twice to just take the crown. So it's
that's the calibre we're looking at, folks.
Absolutely. But with Keir Starmer, I think we're now looking at plain old ineptitude as much as anything else. He seems like he knows what he wants to do, but he just seems incapable of doing it. Even if what he wants to, even though we know that what he wants to do is either insufficient or actually actively damaging, he can't even do that. So that says a lot about him, I dare say.
Absolutely. 12 measuring what could be worse after a while of deluge. 12:25 is the time. I'm going to take your calls. Lots of you calling in about the BBC and Donald Trump, and also the doctors' strikes as well. Get your calls on 0344 499 1000 to have your say. This is Talk.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk, the home of common sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to your calls. So 344 499 1000 is the number to call. James has got in touch from Leicestershire. You want to talk about the Trump defamation suit against the BBC. $5 billion defamation, another $5 billion more added on. What do you make of it, and do you think he's right to do it?
Absolutely right. The BBC were a total disgrace. We should be suing the BBC for misinforming the nation.
Oh, cool. Oh, I'm loving your work. Yes.
What the devil do they think they were doing? We should sue the BBC. The Labour Party sent 200 helpers to try and get Brighton in at election time. Similar sort of thing to this. Have we got a bunch of socialists running the BBC as magnificently well as they're running the country? Because I think it's time that, we should fight, and take up Trump's words. We are totally abused by this set of people who think we should know what they think we should know. And the final point is the BBC should be, and there should be heads rolling further if they're not,
absolutely
insured for defamation of character.
Yeah. Well, they must, exactly. It must be covered by insurance, surely.
Well, you would have thought so. So I've got that off my chest, Julia. You're far better at putting into words whatever.
No, I love the line that they want us to know what they think that we should know. I think that is the absolute killer line there, James. Thank you for your call. I very much appreciate that. I love that. We should be suing them for deceiving us, especially if we're having to pay for a service. And they're deceiving us, and especially Panorama. When Panorama did a night, wow, that's the top-notch journalism in the country. Not anymore.
Mm-hmm. No, exactly. And that's the thing that is a thread throughout all the discussions about the BBC, isn't it? Is that we all remember when it wasn't nearly as bad as it is now. And there's always been problems with a kind of soft liberal bias and so on. But it's just, particularly since 2016, Trump, Brexit, BLM, it's just become increasingly kind of warped and radicalised in a way that many people don't even remember from 10 or 15 years ago.
And here's the thing, they're the radical, they're the extremists, not the rest of us. We are the moderates. They think we're far right. They're just so far to the left. Quite a few messages coming in on this as well on text and tweet. Oliver says, Trump's lawyers will have so much material demonstrating how biased the BBC is that the trial could take a decade. Callum says, to our lefty friends, please make sure you keep paying that TV licence. I want Trump to get every penny he's owed. Trouble is actually not people of many different political persuasions still paying the licence fee. This is the best thing ever for the BBC, says Steve. And Blake says, Trump is doing everyone's dirty work for them. Mary says, not only did they lie about Trump, they also made so many mistakes in their Gaza reporting. Mary, not mistakes. Not mistakes. The sad part is that people are paying for this garbage. We should be holding the BBC and the Labour Party accountable. Joe says, go get them, Donald. Me and the rest of the country 100% behind you. And Sam says, he should have started in the hundreds of billions. Jane says, good for him. I hope he bankrupts them. Let's go to Jason now. He's on the line, wants to talk about doctors' strikes. Jason is in Wiltshire. For those of you who don't know, he's got a special interest in doctors because my mum was his GP. Good afternoon to you, Jason.
Good afternoon, Julia. Thanks for taking the call this afternoon.
Always love to talk to you. What do you want to say about the doctors' strike then? It's going ahead, 7 o'clock tomorrow morning.
Yeah, quickly before I have my rant and rave, because it gets cut off at the end.
It does not get cut off.
Oh, well, it's, thanks very much, and that's it. But I would just quickly like to, obviously, I won't speak to you at the end, but obviously wish the Hartley-Brewer clan, including Hartley-Brewer Senior, a Merry Christmas. And also, thanks for everything you've done in 2025 on your shows, because they've been absolutely brilliant.
You're very kind. Well, thank you for listening and all your contributions.
Yeah, Talk Radio won't be the same without you. But at the end, if you want to ring me, I do take...
I'm not leaving, by the way.
I was going to say, I do take credit card and debit card and also backs for those compliments.
Excellent. Get to your point about doctor strikes, or I will cut you off.
Yeah. No, I'll just say these bloody doctors, I really do not know what they think they are. Yes, they've been to college and got a medical qualification. They're still in hospital. They've gone to a hospital. They're still undergoing training. They don't completely work on their own.
They do a lot of the time, actually.
Okay, well, they do, but they are still undergoing training. So they're the equivalent of me when I was a mechanic. I've been to college and got my papers, but I haven't got the experience. I haven't got all the...
Some of them have got more than 7 years' experience.
But also they haven't got some of the advanced qualifications of what other doctors do. Yep. We have nurses that... got a 5% pay rise. These junior doctors just got a 29% pay rise. They now want another 26.
Yeah.
The government has offered them a 6% pay rise, I think it is, and also to help pay for extra training for them. They don't want to do that, but then they're moaning how much their training costs. Seeing something on the news this morning, all I saw was a load of spotty little oiks stood there saying, we got to work 72 hours for 49,000. But to me, that actually works out. I got a grade E in maths at school, but to me, that works out. I think they're under minimum wage at £49,000 a year.
I think they point out, and by the way, that's their basic wage. They do get some overtime. Now, you're quite right. I'm going to cut you off because you yapped on for so long at the beginning. I don't have time to carry on with the call. I've got to go to a break. Jason and Wiltshire, thank you very much, and a very happy Christmas to you as well when it comes. 12:34 is the time. Up next, going to talk to an NHS doctor who supports the doctors going on strike tomorrow at 7 a.m. Stay tuned for that. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. So afternoon. Welcome back to the show. 12:36 is the time. Let's talk about junior doctors. They are going on strike tomorrow, 7 a.m. for 5 days. This is after a vote was announced yesterday by British Medical Association members of the resident doctors. We used to call them junior doctors, which basically asked them whether they still wanted to go ahead with that strike. Certainly, context of the flu outbreak. Big concerns about the rising number of patients needing to be hospitalised and whether or not it was the right time to strike. So again, it's been condemned by the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, but no, they will be going ahead with 83% of the members who took part, well over 60% took part in that vote, say, yeah, we want to go ahead. They're demanding a 26% pay rise on top of the 29% they had, this covering a couple of years, of course, and they also want some other changes to the training jobs available to them. Well, let's talk about this with Dr. Basha Mukherjee. She's an NHS GP. And Basha, you are very much in support of doctors going on strike. Tell us why.
Well, first of all, Julia, I want to just thank you for supporting doctors in the conversation that we just had before the break. It's nice to actually hear you say positive things about doctors as well. And this is the issue here. I'm a GP. I don't get to strike myself, but this strike is about something that affects healthcare across the board. And the truth is that the way the NHS is going, the way that we're seeing corridor care, the way that even on non-strike days and non-sort of winter days, we're seeing such dire levels of pressure on NHS and services across the board. We need doctors to stay. We need to retain the staff that we have paid in taxpayers' money to train, and they're all leaving. We are losing the best brains in the country to other countries.
We're not losing that many. Can I just ask you, if we've got a massive shortage of doctors and we've got people being, as we do, I've had my own family members left in a corridor with a broken pelvis for 24 hours on a trolley in the corridor, and this is happening. How on earth does doctors going on strike for 5 days, one of the busiest times of the year, help those patients? What a load of nonsense.
Well, I will say that strikes are never an easy choice to make. And
they seem a very easy choice for the BMA.
Sure, the people that have made this choice, they've done this with none of us actually come into medicine trying to think about how we can basically shirk our responsibility. This is not what this is about. And I don't think that the people that go on strike are trying to do that at all. I think what we're trying to do is fight for our rights, because if we don't, the alternative is far worse. I'm worried that the doctors who perhaps are not going on strike, they're actually going into private sector, or they're leaving the country, or they're leaving the NHS or the entire healthcare system.
OK, but you say this. There is a concern about this. And again, I have no issue with doctors who are highly trained, highly qualified individuals being paid very well. I genuinely, not just because I'm a doctor's daughter that I think this. It seems to me to be blatantly obvious that the people who've worked that hard do that job. We want the good people to be going into medicine, so we're going to have to offer competitive salaries. But we are not talking about 50% of doctors leaving the NHS. We're talking about a small number who leave. And largely when people talk about the issues why they're leaving because of, work-life balance rather than pay. That's not the only issue. And that is something that's worth talking about. And certainly Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, who obviously thought that dealing with the doctors was going to be very, very easy because he was a Labour Health Secretary, not a Conservative Health Secretary, walloped over a 29% pay rise, backdated. It was over a few years. Completely accept that. But everyone said at the time, including me, they're going to come back for more. And within 24 hours, the BMA representatives said, yes, we're going to come back for more. Now, Wes Streeting has offered some of the other issues, which I think are completely legitimate concerns from BMA representatives about the number of training places available to qualified doctors and the cost of the exams and things like that. Those are all perfectly valid. And he's offered big concessions on that. So this isn't about patients. This is about wanting more money in their pockets. Let's just and in return for that, they're willing to go on strike at one of the busiest times of the year, and patients will die. That's the reality. How can that be morally justified?
It's not morally justified at any point. Really.
You just justified it.
Let me just clear this: that the hospitals have been given plenty of notice, and there are going to be consultants. They're going to be staffed adequately to cover these shifts. And this is where the problem is, that even on days that we have plenty of notice for the hospitals, when there's no strikes happening, they are not meeting minimum staffing requirements. And this is part of the reason why we're seeing the issues with the backlog of operations, the backlog in terms of A&E waiting lists and all of these things. And we're talking about, is it an unexpected strike? I think it's not, because actually a year ago when Wes Streeting and the BMA and the residents made the deal, it was about full pay restoration, and Wes Streeting has not been able to deliver that full pay restoration. He has not been able to keep up with the deal that he made himself. So actually, I don't think it's something about, oh, they were given a pay rise and then they want even more. They didn't get the full deal. And also, when we're talking about what the government has done so far in terms of offering training positions, first of all, there's contention as to whether or not the training positions will actually result in actual more doctors on the ground. There's definitely conversation about these are being potentially repurposed shifts where doctors who are already working at the trust grade level, they're just being relabeled as trainee doctors. But also, 30,000 doctors applied for 10,000 posts, which has left 20,000 doctors with no career.
Which is insane. And I completely agree with the BMA about that. It is insane. We're paying 250 grand to train doctors and then we haven't got posts for them. And then we're going, we haven't got enough doctors, let's import some abroad. I mean, it is absolutely crazy. That said, by the way, the BMA colluded along with the government on limiting the number of places joined because, of course, you've got a lot more power if doctors, there aren't just, easy to find doctors everywhere. But this is the thing, you talk about full pay restoration. A lot of these claims that the BMA makes about doctors' pay are totally spurious. They're based on a 2008 date. This date that was chosen very specifically because of where pay was at that point. And lots of things changed. And depending whether you use RPI or CPI as your rate of inflation, it's nothing like the pay cut they've had. But here's the reality check. You know what? No one's got richer since the economic crash in 2008. No one's got richer since the lockdown, apart from, I don't know, Michelle Mone and a few others. Most people, whether it's public sector or private sector, have done really badly as a result of that, and they're paying the cost of it. Doctors carried on working throughout all that, and they had some pretty good job security, and they've got good pensions as well. An awful lot of this, other people might say, I'm sorry doctors have lost some of their pay, but you know what? So has everyone else. You're not in a worse position than anyone else. Nurses got much lower pay rise. Soldiers, police officers, other people who also do life-saving work. Frankly, get the hell over yourselves is what a lot of people are now thinking.
And sadly, they are getting the hell over themselves in the wrong way. And this is what I'm really worried about, that the ones that are left in the NHS, they're getting so burnt out by the sheer pressures.
Oh, this is this burnt out nonsense. My mum, when she was training, would work 72 hours over a weekend without a break. This is nonsense.
This is since the time that I was a resident doctor myself. We weren't meeting minimum staffing requirements. So absolutely, we had to do 2-3 members of staff's jobs alone. And yes, we were talking about it. They're not, resident doctors don't work by themselves. They absolutely have to. And thank you, Julia, for actually agree on that point that, yes, we absolutely have to work in conditions where we're not sometimes well supported. And this results in more, and this has actually been, validated by actual figures as well in terms of the number of sick leaves that have gone up since COVID as well in the NHS. And that's reflected, if they don't get a chance to get their needs met, people are going to find a way out, whether that's taking sick leave, whether that's going part-time, or whether that's going, doing only a few days a week in the NHS. I mean, people have heard about GPs doing part-time work at the moment because they're not getting remunerated, and in that spare time...
No, that's not why they're doing GPs are working part-time because they had such a big pay rise about 20 years ago. They can afford to work part-time and do a 3-day week.
Now, I'm a GP myself. Majority of my colleagues are doing side hustles. I've had to do side hustles the entire time I was at medical school whilst doing full-time work.
Oh, sorry, let me get my little violin out. Oh, your side hustle. When you were at medical school. Oh, yeah, sorry, I waitress my way through college. Get over yourself. Students work.
Time is not.
Are you really? Can I just clarify? As much as I appreciate you being on the show, you are so busy and so overworked. Basha, we can't hear both at the same time. You're so busy and so overworked, you've taken 15, 20 minutes out of your massively frantic day to talk on the radio. That's how busy you are.
Well, I'm not going to talk about what I'm doing with my time. Let's go back to the point here. The point is that it's not just about complaining about doing the side hustles. It's that time, if the NHS were to pay doctors better, that they would stay at work and not try and do part-time and other work elsewhere. So this is what I have issue with, that we are competing with other countries, we are competing with other sectors that are going to lure our doctors away.
Most doctors are not leaving the NHS, and they're not, I mean, I'm sorry, if they want to do extra work, I think they do some private work. People are going private. People are using their life savings to go private because they're waiting so long on the NHS. But actually, we had some moments of agreement, some moments of disagreement. We'll wait and see what happens with this strike. You get back to work, treat some sodding patients. Stop talking to me. Dr. Basha Mukherjee, she's an NHS GP. Tom Sage, just a quick response to that.
Well, spirited debate, that's what you want here on talkTV.
But all these doctors saying they're really rushed, and then I appreciate them coming on air, but like, you're not that busy.
But you can't complain for that if you're trying to book them, you know.
I am, but I appreciate it.
And you make time, don't you? You make time for Julia Hartley-Brewer's show, regardless of how busy you are.
Sometimes.
So, but you know, it's as ever, legitimate grievances. Are the tactics correct, and are they going to win the day?
Yeah.
Almost certainly not in the latter case.
Well, we know dentists are going to be paid a bit more to do some of their work. Nice of them to actually bother doing it after we've paid to train them. Just to remind you about it, Dale Vince, we were talking about earlier, just to cover ourselves legally, I just want to make
Very
clear,
important.
because apparently Lord McKinney was saying he's very litigious, and I personally don't care. But I know I don't say anything that is incorrect about him. However, he wrote, I'm saying he's been criticised. A lot of people say absolutely outraged about his views and his comments about the anti-Semitic terror attack at Bondi Beach. This is Dale Vince criticised Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, because he basically criticised the Australian Prime Minister and their support for a Palestinian state, and the Israeli PM had said anti-Semitism was a cancer that spreads when leaders remain silent. Dale Vince wrote, nothing to do with Israel committing genocide in Palestine then. Netanyahu wants anti-Semitism to be a thing. It validates him. He acts to make it so. Morally repugnant is how Tory leader Kemi Badenoch described that. Dale Vince did issue a subsequent post on X, just sort of justifying and explaining himself. So I'm just going to give him the benefit of reply here. He wrote, to be clear, Netanyahu blamed Australian government policy for the terror attack at Bondi Beach. I find that outrageous. Australians surely will too. I pointed out what I believe to be an obvious and logical thing. It is far more likely that Israeli policy, not Australian policy, is the cause. In due course, we may find out as one attacker is in custody. I very much doubt he will cite Australia's recognition of Palestine as his reason for attacking Jewish people. Netanyahu is trying to gaslight us all and tries to use this atrocity to support his arguments. I find that morally repugnant as well as illogical. If I've not been clear enough, I condemn all acts of terror and all forms of racism. There you go, Dale. That was your defence. I don't think it flies, but there we are. That's just to provide his response to the outrage from his initial post. Coming up next, we are going to talk about the sentencing going on right now of the Liverpool parade attacker. That is Paul Doyle. Some extraordinary evidence being presented in court yesterday. Of course, he pleaded guilty on the second day of his trial. We never had a full trial, but he is being sentenced in court. Has been warned already that he will be facing a very tough sentence. That's up next with Mike Neville, a former Met Police DCI. This is Talk.
The Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. Watching and listening to Talk just got easier. There's now only one place for the home of common sense. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, welcome back to the show. So approaching 12:53. Let's turn our attention now to what's actually happening live in court at Liverpool Crown Court, where we are seeing the sentencing of Paul Doyle. He's, of course, the Liverpool parade driver who pleaded guilty on the second day of his trial to an extraordinary number of charges in which he had he run over more than 130 people during that Liverpool FC parade. Originally, I think many of us thought that actually he'd lost his way, he was scared and people were banging on the car doors, but actually no, his dash cam footage, as revealed by the prosecuting counsel yesterday in court as part day one of his sentencing, revealed actually quite the opposite. And in fact, he was heard shouting, "Get out of the effing way," anger, even as he drove into innocent men, women, children, and even babies' prams on that fateful day. It is a miracle that no one died, but some serious injuries resulted. Let's talk to Mike Neville. He's former Metropolitan Police Detective Chief Inspector. Good afternoon to you, Mike.
It's good afternoon, Julia. I've been watching it live myself, the sentencing.
Yeah, it is extraordinary what we heard from the case yesterday. We know there have been gasps in court when the court was shown the first time in full this footage from this dash cam. Showing that actually his version of events, his sort of, this claim we thought, and I think a lot of us thought originally it was a terrorist attack, it had all the hallmarks of an Islamist terror attack. Then it was this guy, we thought, was he drunk? No alcohol, no drugs. And then we thought, well, maybe he was scared and he was out of control in the car. Quite the opposite from the evidence we heard yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. My initial, the initial thing was, of course, a terrorism. Then we heard he was a former soldier, and we thought, is it PTSD or something like that? But of course, what he's been caught out with is modern technology, because the dash cam footage, that's amazing. He wouldn't have had that. The police wouldn't have had that 10 years ago. Then you also have all the CCTV and the ANPR, which have obviously tracked his vehicle, because what the judge made reference to was the awfulness of his driving before the event, to show some sort of the motive here, or the manner in which he was behaving. Also interesting to find out that as a young man, he's got convictions of violence, both in the army, a court-martial, and then when he was left the army. But I think Mr. Justice Menery, the judge, is carefully going through all the injuries of the 31 people who resulted in charges, including, as you said, a baby flung out of a pushchair. It is just unbelievable. Yeah. And also the judge rightly made reference to the impact on the city. The fact that not only were people injured, but for days, things were cordoned off, businesses were impacted on. Just a dreadful
but
incident.
Also a day of celebration, and again, some of the testimony, the victims' impact statements, the mother who was injured herself, but seeing her baby's pram and her baby flung out and thinking for a moment that her baby was dead and that she would die, and she has other young children. I mean, you just those 30 seconds, the worst 30 seconds of her life. You're never going to unlive that experience. But this is the thing. I think a lot of us got the impression very early on, once we realised this was a British man. He was a local man, father of two, and ex-Royal Marine. And again, was it PTSD? But this Mr. Ordinary, happily married guy, the neighbours liked liked him. Everyone at work liked him. No issues, no drink, no drugs. And it must have been this moment of madness. But there's, as you say, there's evidence that he was driving erratically. He was angry. We can't say some of the words he was using, but genuinely, the footage shows as he was driving into children and driving over people, reversing and driving over them again. He was angry that people were in his way. And there's extraordinary testimony from one of the heroes of the day, actually, who the car stopped by him. He opened the door, grabbed in and basically, grabbed the stick and basically put it into park to try and slow the car down. An incredibly brave thing to do. He didn't know whether it was a terrorist attack or not, but just the whole thing is extraordinary. But do you think, has PTSD at all, been part of this at all? Is there any defence being offered for what he did on that day?
Not really, no. It's just being described as an extraordinary incident. But I think it's more than just that a moment in time. He was obviously very, very angry, and due to his driving, they've tracked him in the dash cam. So he's obviously very angry on that day. It wasn't just a momentary thing. And this has just brought out the absolute worst. The sort of we hear about, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Yeah. Well, obviously, literally, you've got Dr. Jekyll who's living with his family, who's turned his life around, not had any convictions for some 30 years, runs a business, and then suddenly
just
this
completely lost it. Yeah,
completely lost it. And then you'd think any rational person, having hit some people, you would think, whoa, time to stop. Yeah. But to keep on going, and the guy who put the park brake on said, you could hear him trying to rev the engine even as that went off.
He was pressing down the accelerator. It is just extraordinary. We haven't actually got to the point. I know this is all happening. Ian Collins is here right now, and we'll be hearing in his show, the actual sentence, because the judge is summing everything up right now. But he's certainly, a lot of the headlines today, he told the police after being arrested, I've ruined my family's life. But certainly, I can't see any mitigating circumstances at this point. Thank God no one died and there's not a murder charge there. This is just GBH, attempted GBH, 17 charges of that and many others. But realistically, victims as young as 6 months and as old as 77, he's going away for a very long time.
Yeah, absolutely. You never know with sentencing. I'd expect at least 15 years or something, at least. But, we just don't know. I can honestly say the judge he's summing up, he's very good. He's taken into account all the victims. As I say, he's taken into account the impact on the city. But